Cataclysm. Survivor's Introduction. www.zhaoshuyuan.com. There was no alarm at all, and the disaster occurred while people were asleep. The Great Cataclysm first brought zombies, and all the dead, without exception, would become their members. But this is not a virus, it looks more like a curse. The protagonist Lin Yang escaped the first night of the catastrophe while traveling with his family. He, who has nothing https://www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Chapter 1. Night of Catastrophe. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, haha. Ha, I don't even understand what happened. I followed the starlight all the way, constantly escaping in the forest. My phone ran out of battery in order to see the map in the travel manual, and I could only believe that I was still running in the direction of the shelter. There should have been no one chasing behind me for a long time, but I couldn't stop. Even if I wanted to, my legs wouldn't allow it. Running, fighting against fate, disregarding the scraped clothes and the soreness all over my body, my breath seemed to be about to vomit out of my lungs, and I gritted my teeth against the smell of blood foam. Even so, I didn't stop. Until the end of the forest, a square-shaped building appeared in the darkness ahead. That's just a cement bungalow that can be seen everywhere. At a glance, the surroundings are empty and quiet. This is the safest place. I opened the wooden door without hesitation and entered it. Ah! Whoa, whoa! I panted heavily with my hands pressing on my knees, and slowly, the smooth breathing gave me an unprecedented sense of security. My sense of security only lasted for more than 10 seconds. Brother, calm down a bit. Listen to me. The low voice came from somewhere. I urgently stopped breathing and called out. Who's there? The shouting covered the trajectory of the person's voice, and I could only look around in the darkness in panic. In the next moment, my face was pressed against the floor, and my hands were pressed against my back, unable to move. Be quiet and don't move around. He didn't exert much force, but he firmly held me in place. The coldness of the cement floor did make me calm by 3 points. I hurriedly said, "You're human, right?" "Me too, cough cough, yes, I can talk. I'm different from them." I lowered my volume, but still got emotional and said a bunch of things that I didn't understand. During this time, I was choked by the dust on the ground. He slowly relaxed me, and as I freed myself from bondage and jumped aside, he said, "Of course, they can't easily subdue me. You're also a survivor, right?" Survivor. When he said this word, it seemed like I was still in a dream, dreaming of my family, hotel customer service, and even the people on the street. All of them screaming and losing their lives. Or rather, were they really dead? Zombies. They have all turned into zombies, my parents. Sob. I choked silently, my suppressed memories surging through my mind, but I could only let them go out of control. I collapsed with my back against the wall, crying silently, but tears couldn't stop falling. My head hung down, my limbs were sore and weak, tears and panting were rushing out of my face, almost driving me crazy. Finally, I looked up and gasped for breath. After calming down a bit, I stood up again and took the initiative to speak. "Who are you?" Tears hindered me from seeing around clearly, but my natural night vision allowed me to adapt to the darkness and grasp the general situation in the shelter. There were many long storage boxes around, all the curtains were pulled up, and there seemed to be a door in one corner of the room that could lead to other places. "Call me Claire, let alone a living person." I finally saw his face clearly, much older than me and a head taller than me. He has a Western face with a beard at the edge of his cheeks, trimmed very well, and his eyes are 7 points sharp with a 3-point ruffian aura, giving him a feeling of a superhero from a movie. "My name is Lin Yang. I came here for a trip with my family, right?" I tried my best to recall my situation, but it seemed like I could only think of some irrelevant things. It seems like I was still hoping that this was really just a dream, but the pain twisted my brain and twisted away my innocent thoughts. Finally, I stopped crying and asked, "What's going on?" Claire patted my shoulder and gestured for me to sit on the wooden bench next to him, then continued, "I'm not sure yet, but it's definitely not a movie. It's real outside. Someone's eating people, and if they die, they'll become one of them. I'm not making a movie, but isn't this a zombie?" I concluded calmly, remembering that I've also watched many old movies with heavy flavors. The bloody smell still lingering in my nose makes me feel like those are all nonsense. "No, it's different." Claire was really calm, as he seemed to have accepted the facts around him. "There was a cemetery on my way here, and when I ran away, I thought there were few people to pass through, but I saw those guys crawling out of the ground." Ah. Isn't it difficult to make a movie, or is it a game that has come true? I try my best to think of things that don't bother me and can relax my nerves for a second. Otherwise, I might shout and shout that it's all a dream, then rush out of the shelter and be devoured by the dark night. After standing for a while, I briefly summarized, "Well, what you mean is that now as long as you die, they will become them, regardless of whether they have been bitten or not. It's very likely like this. There was someone who jumped off the roof without clothes and hit me next to him. He didn't have any bites or scratches on his body, but immediately rushed towards me with his nails nailed to the ground. We exchanged intelligence while starting to search in the shelter. When I woke up at the hotel, there was already a power outage in the city, and obviously there was no electricity here. Only darkness connected the whole world. I have nothing on me except for my phone and wallet, and there is nothing available in my wallet. Claire said he's pretty good either, but fortunately we found some life-saving things. More than 50 packs of cold packaged protein rations, each weighing 200 grams, are ready to eat when unpacked. Even if the packaging is not opened, it should not expire. Whether it tastes good or not cannot be overestimated. A bucket of bottled water and more than 10 bottles of mineral water all look very clean. There are also several blankets and a first aid jacket with reflective strips attached. When I took out the emergency jacket from the cabinet, Claire joked that wearing this outfit now would only make the zombie discover themselves faster than the emergency personnel, relaxing the tense atmosphere between us. And I feel like neither myself nor Claire fits well with this jacket. Lighters, matches, and a lot of waste paper, as well as a few small knives that can be used to slice apples, can be used as daggers to make zombies laugh. There is also a small manual that looks like a disaster shelter guide, but there is no light. No matter how hard I can see at night, I can't see exactly what is written inside. I am considering the things piled up on the floor in small quantities, and overall, the materials can meet the basic needs in a short period of time. With a material foundation, my mind has finally calmed down, and hope has also ignited in my heart. I must be able, no, I must live. Half the night has passed, and the two have not waited for the next survivor. As for whether there are any other living people in the city, based on what they saw when they fled, the situation is not optimistic. Perhaps only the two of them can get here. I don't know if this is good or bad, but the two are ready to take the next step. Find a car that can be driven. Whether running away after being discovered or actively seeking rescue, the two urgently need transportation that can shake off zombies. The shelter they are in is only 3 kilometers away from the edge of the city. Although it is close, it is located in the woods. If it weren't for a narrow cement road connecting here, perhaps no one would have been able to find it. Just say it's a city, it's actually a small town with a Western style, otherwise the Linyang family wouldn't have come here for tourism. There are few high-rise buildings, a small population, and beautiful scenery. There is a small lake located to the east of the town. The transportation is also convenient. The expressway runs through the north corner of the town, connecting east and west, and passing through some lakes to reach the next nearby city. In the other direction, it will take a long walk to see the large settlement again, and the shelter where the two are located is sandwiched in this direction. In the forest to the west of the town. This place is secluded, and perhaps no one can find it. On the other hand, it's only a matter of time for those wandering around to discover it. The unconscious dead are more like thunderstorms scattered by nature than missiles launched by enemies, or rather, they are both natural disasters and man-made disasters. After clarifying their goals, Lin Yang and Claire finally relaxed a bit and chatted about their past in their leisure time. Lin Yang graduated from high school and has only just entered university for a semester. Legally speaking, although he is an adult, he is still just an inexperienced child, at most a student who understands some things. For Lin Yang, this family trip celebrating his college career would have been a memorable and beautiful memory. He was awakened by the noise on the street at the hotel, the heating stopped, and the room was very cold. Just as he was putting on his clothes and shoes and preparing to open the door to look for his parents in the next room, there was a knocking sound coming from the door. It was his mother who kept warning him not to go out. However, Lin Yang had to open the door due to his mother's screams, and the roar of a deceased person. His father dragged him into the current abyss. His mother had already fallen into the pool of blood at his father's feet when I came back to my senses. The pools of blood at my feet solidified in less than a moment, like a deep sea, darker than this long night. Really his mother black. Thinking of this, Lin Yang's emotions gradually spiraled out of control. He struggled to think. Is it luck to escape death, or is it a trick of fate? Fortunately, Claire comforted Lin Yang in a timely manner, so that he wouldn't give up or seek his own shortcomings. Claire was originally a bar owner, and he told Lin Yang that it has been very peaceful here recently. Violent incidents often occur, and a few days ago, even a death occurred at the entrance of his bar. A few thugs killed a police officer, as reported in the news. Claire decided to temporarily suspend business until the wind passed. Tonight, as he locked his storefront and drove to the gas station, preparing to leave, a massive zombie attack occurred. Claire decisively escaped from the back door of the convenience store to the city park, and after thinking about it, it was because he gave up driving that he successfully escaped from the city. As far as he could see, driving away in the city center would only add a zombie tied to a seatbelt. Apart from the roads that have already been blocked by various car accidents, zombies are also quite sensitive to noise and headlights, and the armor of family cars clearly cannot block groups of zombies. Perhaps the frequent occurrence of violent incidents is not as reported in the news, but rather due to drug abuse, which may be a signal on the eve of the cataclysm, but no one has paid attention to it. Claire does not recommend finding his car. The gas station where he parked is near the entrance and exit of the town's highway, which is already overcrowded. Therefore, a suitable method is to obtain the car keys of others, near this shelter. On the edge of the town, only in this way can there be a chance to drive the car back and reduce the risk of encountering zombies. In short, Lin Yang can only temporarily listen to Claire's opinion, not to mention that he is not only unfamiliar with his hometown, but also has not even turned the steering wheel of his car. The only few survival skills may be diligent in reading, slightly farther than others at night, faster running, and relatively good physical strength. After all, he is still young. Claire is much more experienced, and the most important thing now is that he can drive and shoot, but they don't have either of these things now. Claire's gun also landed on his own car. However, Claire also does not recommend the use of firearms. He witnessed a police officer immediately surrounded by a dozen or so zombies after shooting, and the noise quickly attracted crowds of zombies in the darkness. Even more terrifying is that bullets cannot kill them. Whether it's a head blow or a heart break, zombies will keep attacking. Perhaps a broken leg would be better, because the zombie that fell and died next to Claire can only crawl with its hands, otherwise Claire may not be able to escape. Upon hearing this, Lin Yang felt despair again. If no means could stop them, how would he escape? Where can we escape again? They will always catch up. Claire had a different idea. Maybe they just need to stay here for a while, and the army will arrive. Bullets can't kill them, can't shells still blow them up into pieces? Yeah. Lin Yang finally mustered up his spirits. Can zombies still scratch through tanks and bite off fighter jets? If you can't kill it with a headshot, then I can burn it into ashes for you, right? Yes, Lin Yang thought to himself. As long as he hides quietly, in a few days, all kinds of planes and artillery will flatten the occupied town. There's no need to risk going to the city, the food and water here are enough to support the two of us for several days of course. Claire still plans to get a car, and Lin Yang naturally has no objections. Be prepared for any potential risks. What's important is that he now holds hope and his mentality has improved a lot. At least the military will avenge my parents and let them rest in peace. However, what Lin Yang and Claire don't know is, if it's just a zombie, how can it be called a major disaster? Chapter 2. Animal Weakness or Human Courage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. In the early morning, both inside and outside the shelter were still pitch black, which was the darkest time before dawn. Lin Yang didn't sleep for long. If we don't count the first half of the night, he only slept in the shelter for a little over an hour. However, he naturally woke up, not from the cold, but from the screams in the nightmare. After waking up, he touched his phone and pressed it several times, but the screen didn't light up. Just as he was about to turn over, he was scared back to reality by the weightlessness of leaning half of his body. He jumped back in his mind, and his consciousness and memory immediately pressed against his back, causing him to suddenly sit up on the bench. Goo ah, he was sweating profusely, his lips and throat were extremely thirsty, and he couldn't even swallow a mouthful of water. Perhaps the protein food he had eaten before sleeping was too dry, right? He thought wildly until Claire came to him with a bottle of water. Claire didn't sleep at all. According to him, he is still working at this time. Whoa, you're... Uncle Koo, I'm still here, still alive. The water was a bit cold, piercing his throat and tongue, while also awakening Lin Yang's consciousness. It seems that in his dream, he had already died, but it's also uncertain. Perhaps the college student who had just grown up and traveled with his family did indeed die. Lin Yang is now a survivor hiding in a shelter, a living person from the end of the world. Claire, who was also a survivor, said to him, "If you want to use the restroom, go outside." I looked around and found that besides plants and some missing birds, only we are still alive. You can rest assured now. Lin Yang nodded slightly and went to the shelter to take a nap. It was still very dark outside, and the fresh air and waste discharge made his body much clearer. After urinating, he walked around the shelter and roughly remembered what the environment around the shelter was like. Except for the cement road at the main entrance, including the back door, it is surrounded by forests. The trees are not very dense, and the low shrubs are also sparse. It is unknown if there are any edible fruits on top. The soil was very soft, with scattered stones and long fallen branches. It happened to be a handy straight wooden stick. Lin Yang picked it up and waved it casually a few times, but the stick was still full of water and very sturdy. Lin Yang returned to the shelter and caused an uproar. Claire saw him holding a long pole instrument and thought he was another survivor, but hesitated to respond because the other person held a weapon. It wasn't until Lin Yang called him Uncle Koo that he dispelled his doubts. Lin Yang also realized at this moment that he could see the other party earlier than Claire. Seeing more clearly at night and farther than others is actually a rare talent. Perhaps it is because of this that he can smoothly escape the pursuit of death in the streets with power outages. So Lin Yang suggested, why not take action now? He told Claire that he could also see far at night, which was certainly an advantage at this time. Claire couldn't make up her mind and said, "It's nice to see far in the dark, but zombies can still hear." Although zombies are sensitive to noise, how is their hearing? Being able to move upon hearing a sound, and being able to hear the sound itself, are two different things. He is not sure how far the zombie's hearing is, whether it is as keen as a beast, or has it been enhanced by a virus or something. Lin Yang couldn't say for sure, so he said, "Why don't we give it a try?" "You said give it a try." Claire was very surprised. He didn't know if it was a kind of courage, or if it was a lack of courage and strategy. "Yeah, they always leave alone, especially on the edge of the town. When I ran out, there felt like there were only a few zombies." Although the two were face-to-face, Claire couldn't quite see the expression on Lin Yang's face, but he could sense the youthful spirit and the firmness emanating from the stick he held. This is an adventure. Claire's animal instincts warned him that even minor injuries could lead to death, and animal instincts did not allow him to make decisions that did not conform to survival rationality. But Claire is not just an animal. Although he was often called Bear Shop Manager, or Wolf Uncle, when he was still a bar owner, he is undoubtedly also a human. Yes, he can certainly feel the emotions and rationality that also come from teenagers and humans. What else do we have to lose? Lin Yang doesn't need to say much. Claire's parents had already enjoyed their old age and drove west. Fortunately, their bodies were still cremated. He is unmarried and naturally has no offspring. Looking back now, his only family left before the arrival of this dog-like nightmare world, which can be considered very fortunate. On the other hand, being tied up will only lead to sitting and waiting for death. After a psychological struggle, Claire ignited his passion and agreed with Lin Yang's opinion, but he said not to do it specifically, but to do it on the way to finding a car. Lin Yang nodded in agreement, and the strength of holding the stick increased by 3 points. This strength stems from human courage, not animal cowardice. The two first check their own conditions. In winter, their clothes are relatively thick. Lin Yang is wearing a hooded jacket, loose sports pants, sports shoes, and warm underwear, while Claire is wearing a long windbreaker jacket, warm sweater vest, shirt and shorts, jeans, and leather shoes. However, relying solely on the material and thickness of existing clothing is clearly not enough to block zombie attacks, so they simply armed themselves with the materials at hand. Cut the emergency jacket into strips of cloth with a small knife, tie the waste paper to the soft and exposed parts of the body, such as the limbs and waist, and then fold the outermost layer of paper in half and press it against each other. This can not only cover the prominent reflective material of the emergency jacket, but also not make oneself unprepared. Paper armor has no other drawbacks besides being somewhat cumbersome, hindering joint movement, and being disposable. Defense is in place, then weapons. The two of them sharpened the wooden sticks and found some stronger and thicker ones. They sharpened them like spears and left a few for later use. Unless absolutely necessary, no one would want to engage in hand-to-hand combat with zombies. Finally, they hid most of the food in a shallow pit, leaving only a few bottles of water in prominent places and with them, and then set off on the road. This is the first night for Lin Yang to dance with Claire and the deceased, and also the first night for millions of survivors who escaped the first wave of disaster to become the deceased. With the night vision of Lin Yang, they set off along the road, and compared to the trees blocking their view, the straight road can better leverage their own advantages. Although it cannot be seen as far as during the day, on this clear night, the moonlight and starlight are sufficient. Relying solely on the stars and moon to see people dozens of kilometers away is actually very rare. Ultimately, these rays of light are too faint for most people. Lin Yang believes that the same is likely true for zombies, otherwise he wouldn't be able to escape from the city center. When he ran away, he saw many people stumbling in the dark. They were not actually directly chased by the zombies, but ran into the zombie group themselves in the chaos. The people who risked using flashlights to find their way ended up even worse. Lin Yang remembered playing with his peers when he was a child, and he also became the king of hide and seek at night through night vision. He couldn't believe that after the power outage, he could still rely on it to make a living for a while. Are those buddies still alive now? Not long after walking in the dark night, Lin Yang stopped thinking about these sad things. He had already made up his mind to constantly cut ties with this dark world, that is, to continue living. There was no danger along the way, not even seeing common nocturnal animals. The two of them suddenly felt as if there were no living creatures in this world except for them, and even the sun had died. They walked for half an hour on a 3-kilometer road, wanting to finish it faster and not daring to walk recklessly in the dark. However, they ended up walking at a speed similar to regular walking. After reaching the edge of the town along the road, the situation began to change. They could also vaguely see from a distance that several high-rise buildings in the city center were already raging, including the hotel in Linyang that was still sleeping a few hours ago. This was obviously not done by the military. Claire remembered that when she left the gas station, she also smelled a slight smell of gasoline in the air. But she did not hear the explosion, which means the gas station had not been ignited yet. The two of them noticed that they were currently upwind, which means the fire should not have spread here for the time being. However, at this moment, the center of the town was already a time bomb. Although they are far away, the two of them know that they need to accelerate their actions, otherwise they may also fall into a sea of fire. And if the town is completely burned down, the likelihood of finding the car will be even smaller. At the intersection of the road and the outer ring road connecting the town streets, they hid behind the trash cans on the roadside and looked towards the block. Not far away, they could already see the contours of some low-rise buildings, which were some residential buildings in the suburbs of the town, typical Western-style large houses, many of which had their own courtyards and garages. At the end of the street not far away, they saw those familiar figures again. The scattered zombies appear to move slowly, but this is not because those zombies are already meaninglessly roaming. Although slow, they are all moving towards the city center. Because the occasional sound of building collapses, screams, alarms, and gunshots coming from the city center can even be heard by Lin Yang and his team. The zombies were attracted to go there, which was a good opportunity. Lin Yang tried not to think about the tragic fate of the people who still stayed in the city center at this moment. He carefully looked at the zombies and finally understood why they walked so slowly. Those zombies are all old people. If even the elderly become them, will children also become detestable as a result? Lin Yang's heart was not wavering, but rather a wave of nausea, as if he wanted to scoop up garbage from the water but stirred up the entire pool. The malice of this world was so blatantly exposed to all living people. Lin Yang told Claire about what he saw, and Claire also thought it was a good opportunity now. They selected several houses with open doors or broken windows and searched inside from the edge of the town, hoping to achieve their goals without going too deep into the street. They carefully searched each room and found many useful things. Candles and flashlights, kitchen knives and pans, thread and sewing needles, wrenches and screwdrivers. The most important thing is that they found a few backpacks to store their loot, so they can take more delicious food. While the food hasn't spoiled due to power outages, it's also a good choice to go to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. In this post-apocalyptic world, it seems that everything is useful and worth taking away, but the two of them only couldn't find a car that could take them away. Occasionally clearing window frames and stepping on broken glass can make a slight noise, but the sound of disaster from the city center is even louder, overshadowing the small movements of the two people's actions. There are still many bloodstains and severed limbs in some houses, and the two of them have become accustomed to it, so as not to be scared out of courage. Although they have not encountered zombies, they are still careful. Until they searched through the easily invading houses but couldn't find the car, they had to face the choice of whether to take further risks. Even if you find a car in the garage or on the street, it's useless without a key. It seems that most of the keys are still hanging on their original owners, and they either ran away or died before running away. Since the car is still here, the possibility of the former no longer exists. Therefore, Claire can only propose to either continue the search, which means that the two will continue to delve deeper into the neighborhood, increasing their chances of being engulfed by a swarm of corpses or a sea of fire. Or try to pry open the tightly closed doors and windows, which will trigger the security alarm of the house, and it is no different from forcefully knocking on the car door, and there is no guarantee that they will find a car that can be opened. Unless someone leaves the car key in the car or room, the latter's possibility has been largely ruled out by their search, while the former is just a desperate gamble, equivalent to taking one's own life to buy a lottery ticket. Alternatively, they could only find a lonely homeowner nearby and then remove the car key from its corpse. Lin Yang and Claire chose the second option. Apart from the high risk of the first option, the key is that they have already found a suitable target. Chapter 3, First Drop of Blood. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, I am exploring in a house. Working in the dark places puts double the pressure on people, and the fear of darkness etched in human bones has increased even more on this night of disaster. Fortunately, I am not completely blinded by the darkness. We searched for the 10th house, which has not yet encountered any danger, but still cannot tolerate any relaxation. The distant screams and the sound of houses collapsing continued, indicating that there was a wall outside the street that was on the verge of death, turning into thick smoke and black fire, constantly approaching us. Sometimes, from the entrance or window of the house, we can see several zombies heading towards the city center. We can only quietly hide in our rooms, waiting for them to walk away from the street. The sound inside the house is also tense on our nerves. Sometimes it's just a cat pushing open the toilet door, a squirrel playing with the leaves in the backyard, some insects chirping. If all of this hadn't happened, I might still marvel at the relatively good ecological environment here, but now, besides increasing tension, insects and small animals are left to stand idly by and watch this disaster that has nothing to do with them. I am even worried that their small noise may attract zombies. Here, there's a keychain. Claire whispered to me not far from behind as we rummaged through boxes and cabinets in the living room. Looking back, he seemed to have found many keys in the cabinet next to the TV. I immediately came to Claire's side and searched with him to see if there was a spare car key left by the landlord. We have found an intact electric car in the garage of this house. The garage roller shutter door is opened and closed using a steel chain winch, and can be opened without electricity. In short, as long as you can find the car key, everything will be fine. But we tossed and turned, emptied the entire drawer, but couldn't find the car keys. They all looked like spare keys for a particular door or box. The loss spread in our hearts again, and the wasted time turned around and gave us a blow, making the situation even more anxious. Damn it, why do you have so many keys? Claire exhaled and cursed, and I could only silently agree in my heart. I said to Claire, we've searched everything on the first floor, only the second floor is left. We started searching from the inside out, making it easier to escape in case of danger. Now, we have to go deep into the building again, but there's no room for affectation. We immediately placed backpacks filled with supplies in the living room on the first floor and headed to the second floor. The second floor of such a large mansion is usually the master bedroom, and important assets are likely to be placed there. I secretly prayed to myself that it would be like this, and then we went to the second floor together, briefly searching for the car keys. Dong! Bang 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 bang. I was about to open a decorated and flashy cabinet in the hallway on the second floor when the deep sound of the building collapsing came again, and the vibration even shook my feet. The sea of fire is very close to us, and I remember that many of the houses here have a lot of wooden components. Including the ones we are currently in. Even if we are upwind of the city center, the flames are indifferent and devouring the remaining towns. Time is really running out if the fire burns over, let alone looking for a car. Both Claire and I will be buried here. It's time to make a decision. I temporarily gave up searching for the key and turned to find Claire. I had just found the door to the second floor bedroom when I turned the corner and bumped into Claire, who came out from inside. I was a bit scared, but he held my mouth down. "Shoo, there's a situation in the backyard." I nodded silently, and he let go. We leaned over to the bedroom window together, looking towards the backyard of the house. A corpse was wandering in the backyard, not attracted by the sound of the street. I could see the reason clearly. It had lost one ear, half of its face was dimmer than the night, and the other surviving ear was still half a pair of broken headphones. The backyard was quite dark, and Claire couldn't see clearly. I told him about the appearance of the zombie, and Claire listened thoughtfully. "That won't be, is it, this house?" I whispered to Claire. "Yes, I've seen that guy in a bar. When he was alive, he wouldn't go anywhere else except the bar at night. So when the bar closed today, did he stay at his own house? Although I don't know how he died in his own backyard, this is an opportunity, the car key should be on it." I confirmed with Claire again, and he agreed, saying, "This is the only opportunity left." We returned to the first floor of the house again and found the backyard gate on the other side of the house. The door was open, and we hid by the door to further observe the environment. The floor and lawn were filled with dragging bloodstains and messy footprints. It's not difficult to imagine that he was attacked by his own family before his death. Just like me, he stayed here after the corpse disappeared because he couldn't hear. These are not important now. I try my best to clear my mind and only think about what to do next. Since we can't hear it, it's easy for us to get close from behind. It does have a car key on its body. I have seen the keychain hanging on its waistband, and the appearance of the car key, which is a circle larger, is even more eye-catching. Claire responded briefly, "Well, I'll nail it down, you take the opportunity to grab it." After finishing his words, the wooden spear in his hand trembled slightly. When the living corpse turned its back to us, he clenched the spear in both hands, with his left hand in front and right hand in the back, the spear head facing down, and stepped forward, his center of gravity also reaching his waist. We stepped into the hospital one after another, with him on both sides. We took 3 steps apart, facing each other and slowly approaching the target sideways. After walking less than 10 steps, the target was brought close to the attack range. Claire stepped on it with his left foot, using it as a fulcrum to accelerate rapidly. While twisting his waist, he released his spear with his left hand and pushed his right hand along the path of force, piercing the zombie's chest from behind. Step out with your right foot and stop yourself, turning your entire body along with your waist. Then, switch your hands back and forth, raise the tail of your spear with your left hand, and press the tip of your spear heavily with your right hand. As a result, your upper body tilts and the zombie is pinned to the soil, unable to move. After the blow, Claire turned his back to me and didn't look back. He closed his breath and shouted, "Quick!" This blow was already his full strength, but the zombie was still struggling on the ground. I saw the timing right and, while the zombie's hands and feet were still haphazardly tapping the ground, I rushed towards its waist from the side and grabbed it before taking off the keychain. "All right." After getting it, I immediately got up and jumped away. Claire also changed her posture, tied up her horse stance, and used her upper body to press down on the spear. The long barred weapon then penetrated 3 points deeper, and the zombie could no longer move. The missing chest and lungs ensured that it could not make any sound. Success. Claire and I quickly returned to the door, looked at the zombie, and confirmed once again whether it was unable to move. It did thump for a while again and quickly stopped moving, but it was not dead. It was probably because its face was now half buried in the soil, unable to hear or see, unable to shout or move, so it stopped moving. Ha! Ha! At the end of the battle, Claire and I were panting heavily. I couldn't count how much effort I had put in, but the adrenaline my body secreted made me feel like I was still exerting too much force. I patted the dirt on my face to not get too excited. However, in terms of exerting too much force, Claire is probably the same. These guys are not that difficult to kill, are they? He grinned dryly, and the corners of my mouth slightly curled up. The oppression and anxiety of exploring in the darkness, as well as the painful memories of the first half of the night, were all swept away. After a brief rest to celebrate the victory, I handed over the car keys to Claire. The backyard was close to the garage, and Claire went to the garage to confirm that the car keys were working. I then went to the living room to retrieve the backpack and loot left there. Claire confirmed in the garage that the car keys match, and now all he needs to do is drive the car back and it's done. But he cannot rush to drive, nor can he easily open the garage door first, as any noise may attract nearby zombies. Just waiting for the boy, Claire realized that something seemed to be wrong. The garage is located in the courtyard outside the house, close to the street and city center. In theory, any movement on the street should be heard most clearly here. But at this moment, Claire felt an unusually quiet surroundings. Quiet as if a catastrophic event had never happened before. Impossible, his hands still have the heat of piercing the zombie just now, all of this is not an illusion. At the moment when Claire denied the idea, he was unusually shattered by the boy's shout. "Uncle Ku!" The boy shouted loudly, "It's an emergency." Claire didn't think much and took a step back to the house. Claire had just taken a step out of the back door of the garage when a zombie approached him from the side. His strong physique did not make him fall, he just knelt half on one knee. The zombie didn't hug Claire and simply hit his waist, so Claire grabbed the zombie's tattered clothes and used the opportunity to throw it backwards a few meters, causing it to fall hard to the ground and break its neck. Claire was still in shock when the sound of window glass being broken came from the house. Was that done by a boy? Or rather, Claire already had the worst plan in mind. He stood up and finally saw the situation around him. There were many zombies scattered in small groups on the street. Looking out, the nearby street. Under the sea of fire, there seemed to be a reflection of the tide of zombies, and they were already surrounded by half a circle of zombies. Not good. How did they come here? We didn't make any sound before, did we? But Claire didn't have time to hesitate. He still strode towards the house and immediately found Lin Yang in the living room. At this moment, Lin Yang is being pressed under a very fat zombie. They are both on the dining table, and there are two zombies on the ground with broken legs. One zombie that is close to him is grabbing the table and shaking non-stop. The young man stood in front of him with a spear stained with blood on his head, blocking the hands of the chubby zombie. Obesity prevented the zombie from stretching its neck to bite the young man, but he was almost suffocated by the pressure. Claire had no weapons in his hand. He picked up the small potted plant by the door and threw it onto the fat zombie's head, followed by a run-up and a side kick that hit its thick fat waist. Claire's fierce kick clearly shook the chubby zombie, and Lin Yang followed suit and finally flipped the fat-headed zombie that was pressing on him under the table. He also flattened the broken leg zombie that was shaking the table legs. Moreover, due to the head being hit, the chubby zombie appeared to be in a state of dizziness. Ahem. Lin Yang was pulled up from the table by Claire and stumbled back a few steps. The two of them also took the opportunity to retreat to the door when Claire arrived. Uncle Ku. Cough, backpack. Lin Yang picked up two backpacks at his feet, which should have been thrown from the other end of the living room. The other backpacks were completely surrounded by zombies. In less than a minute of seeking help from Lin Yang, there were 5 or 6 zombies in front of them, on the other side of the living room near the street, and outside the street, there could only be more ha. As the two of them retreated while carrying their backpacks, the piercing sound of breaking the glass window came again. The movement here was so loud that it would constantly attract the surrounding zombies. Combined with the zombie tide and fire that Claire had seen before, this place must not be left for long. Following Claire's path, just as he was about to pass through the remaining rooms, within a few steps, an explosion in the city center swept through the entire town, like a thunderbolt exploding directly on the ground. The two of them couldn't figure out whether they had been hit off-center by the shockwave or if the house itself had been shaken askew. Oh, ah. They were knocked unconscious in place by the shock. Fortunately, the house was far from the center of the explosion, and the two of them were not close to the glass. Claire leaned against the wall, and Lin Yang half knelt. Neither of them was injured, but they were so shocked that they couldn't lift their heads. The only good news is that in that moment, the zombie was also knocked unconscious and lost their specific positions. The two understood that the zombie's momentary cessation of movement was their only chance of survival. They didn't wait for their brain to regain balance under the impact, so they forcefully pulled their legs and drove themselves out of the house to the garage. That car was originally designed for their long-term plans in the future, but now it is the only straw left for them to save lives. The two of them stumbled away from the house, and in the courtyard, the zombie that Claire had broken its neck got up again, blocking them from the garage. Claire was about to drag his dizzy body forward when Lin Yang grabbed him. The boy picked up a stone and smashed it towards the distant pottery flower bed. The crooked neck zombie, with its head hanging on its chest and its eyes pointing in an unknown direction, followed the sound. The two of them successfully solved the problem and managed to secure Baogui's escape time. Arriving at the garage, Lin Yang couldn't help but turn the winch of the rolling shutter door, while Claire went around to the left driver's cab to start the car. Soon, the rolling shutter door was pulled half open by the boy with difficulty. Lin Yang was about to look up to confirm if the gap was enough for the car to pass, but he only saw an extremely twisted face. A zombie stood silently in front of him, so close that the boy seemed to feel the breathing of the corpse. Woo! The boy kicked the zombie and was about to turn back to grab his spear against the wall next to him, but was grabbed by the zombie's heel and they all fell outside the garage door. Damn you! The young man kicked and cursed, to no avail. The zombie didn't wait for him to finish cursing, so he hugged his calf and took a bite. Ah! The young man took a deep breath of air. Fortunately, his legs were wrapped in armor made of waste paper, and he didn't have any skin or flesh at the moment. Even so, he still felt a heavy sense of pressure coming from his legs, making it difficult to break free. The zombies around have already gathered, and the nearest one is only 10 steps away. It is the chubby zombie that has crushed the boy at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Its broken features look down on the boy waiting to be slaughtered, and beneath its ugly face, there seems to be a smug expression. The young man also knew that even without night vision, zombies could still be seen clearly at such a close distance, but his night vision made him see more clearly. As if clearly seeing one's own death date. Is that all I have to do? Despair permeates the youth from the legs, and a sense of powerlessness rushes into the body, like being bound to a stone and sinking into the sea, into endless darkness. Hikar. In an instant, the young man's eyes were not darkness, but were dyed with pure white. The strong light hit his brain and he could only reflexively close his eyes, returning to another darkness with a white background. In the darkness, the young man felt a tremendous force tugging at his collar, instantly moving away from the hard and cold cement road, seeming to take off for a while, and then landing in a narrow but stable, yet soft place. Who? The boy opened his eyes and landed in the back of a car, which was exactly the car Claire had driven out of the garage. Hurry up. Turn the steering wheel. Without hesitation, the young man immediately got up and leaned into the front row of the car, turning left to avoid them colliding with the house across the street. At this moment, the boy saw clearly that Claire was lying horizontally under him. Claire only stepped on the gas pedal with one foot, but lay horizontally in the passenger seat with the backrest down. The passenger door was also open, and Uncle used this posture to pull himself back into the car while the car was moving forward. In less than a moment, Claire finally straightened up and closed the co-pilot's door, grabbed the steering wheel, and the two of them drove away after colliding with several zombies surrounding them in front of the road. Chapter 4. Curse the World. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Lin Yang and Claire drove back to the shelter, one after another, and finally it was getting light. The two are not sure what it means to see the sun again, but at least it indicates that the world is still spinning, which may be good news. I am really exhausted. In this collapsed world, it is even more precious for ordinary people to survive. The cost is that both of them have exhausted all their strength and need time to recover. For the hard-earned success of survival, the two did not feel that it was an achievement, their emotions were not complicated, they only wanted a peaceful rest. So they parked the car horizontally, blocked the main door of the shelter from the outside, and then blocked the back door with a storage box from the inside. In the shelter, which was still covered with curtains, they fell asleep soundly. The two of them woke up again, it was already noon. Although it had entered winter, it did not immediately become cold. This is indeed a good place for tourism. Lin Yang slept soundly without dreaming, but when he woke up, he still had difficulty understanding what he had experienced last night. It seemed that it was not impossible to describe those experiences as dreams. He patted his face and gradually woke up a few minutes later. Just as he was about to move himself, he felt soreness all over his body, especially in his legs and feet. Lin Yang had to sit up slowly, letting his body temporarily numb. He looked around and saw the curtains shining, but the shelter's back door was no longer obstructed. Has Uncle Ku woken up yet? Lin Yang didn't worry too much. He had gradually adapted to his sore legs and was about to stand up when Claire entered the shelter through the back door. Wake up, Xiaolin. Oh, your phone. I fully charged it with the car. Claire placed Lin Yang's phone on one side of the bench, and Lin Yang leaned to get it, but his waist and abdomen were also sore. Woo! Lin Yang could only take the opportunity to lie back on the bench. What's wrong, are you injured? Claire came to Lin Yang's side, and Lin Yang said it wasn't much. At that moment, Lin Yang noticed that he was still wearing tattered paper armor. After receiving his phone, he sat up again and began slowly removing the armor that had been tortured by sweat and repeated rubbing. That's good, if there's a wound, there's medicine in the basement here that can be used, Claire said, touching her waist and abdomen, tightly bandaged under her clothes. Lin Yang was puzzled and said, are you injured? And what is the situation with the basement? Claire said that when he woke up in the morning and opened the waste paper, he realized that he had been bitten by a zombie on his waist. There wasn't much waste paper tied there, so he was still bitten. The wound wasn't deep, but of course he couldn't let go. At least he needed to find something to disinfect it. So I discovered the basement here. Where is the entrance? Upon hearing Claire's explanation, Lin Yang quickly opened the waste paper on his leg to check if he was injured. Fortunately, there was a tooth embedded in the waste paper on his leg, and there were terrifying scratches and bloodstains left, but they were all left by zombies and he himself was not in any big trouble. I was bitten by zombies, are you not afraid that I will be infected and become them? Claire did not immediately answer Lin Yang, but asked him again. If you become them, I won't be able to run away even if I want to. Just accept my fate. Anyway, I was saved by you and have survived until now. Lin Yang said with a bitter smile, anyway, it's okay if the injury doesn't matter. He is not afraid of Claire's mutation, nor is it that if an ordinary person can escape death 3 times in a row within 24 hours in this great disaster, then the probability of believing that the disaster will not occur is even higher. In other words, Lin Yang no longer intends to escape, both physically and mentally, he has reached his limit. So, he could only believe that Claire would not easily become them, and even if misfortune happened, he had no regrets. He had done his best, and if he had to defeat the life-saving benefactor in order to survive, then that life was not worth it. Claire looked at the young man in front of him, who was struggling to get up now, full of hot blood but still lingering around his heart, emitting the vitality of life and the will of humanity. Even if it was death, it was my own choice. The old man can't remember the last time he saw a boy who refused to bow to his fate. Claire thought to herself. Lin Yang trusted him, so he begged me for help at a critical moment. If I only used the boy as bait, then I could immediately run away alone while he acted as a danger warning. But Lin Yang chose to believe me, so he handed me the car key and went back to get the supplies himself. It should have been me, or we could have gone together. I was too eager to find the car. While Claire was reflecting on himself, he also realized that the young man had grown up very quickly. In just one night, the young man was incredibly determined to accept the current reality. Indeed, only in this way can teenagers have the ability to challenge it. Claire said, "Don't blame yourself too much. Without you, we wouldn't be able to take action at night. Look at the locked door." I pried it open. "There's a bathroom and a lot of medical supplies in the basement." Claire pointed to one side, and there was a courtyard next to the dark corner door, which opened the roof of the shelter. Neither of them noticed it yesterday. Lin Yang felt fortunate and said, "So you don't have to worry about the medicine you lost last night." Speaking of last night, I shouldn't have been greedy for those few bags, which almost made it impossible for the two of us to come back. During Lin Yang's self-reflection, Claire brought protein rations and water on the side, and the two sat on the bench to eat, recalling and analyzing their experiences from last night. If they didn't want to be surrounded by zombies the next time, it was necessary to understand the situation last night. This is the innate ability of humans to learn and reflect. Claire said, "That's not your problem. It's because I was too obsessed with the car and stayed there searching for too long, but didn't realize that we had been discovered, which was why I left you alone." Speaking of which, how were we discovered? We probably hadn't exposed ourselves before I called out, Lin Yang pondered, dragging his chin. "It's like a dog in my hometown, barking at strangers from several cornfields." "Wait, like a dog?" Lin Yang had a sudden idea, and Claire said the answer. "Yes, they can smell human scent just like dogs, but their sense of smell may not be as sensitive. It was because they smelled our scent that the zombies slowly surrounded them." "I see, last night we were all upwind, and when we stopped there to search, the streets were filled with our scent," Lin Yang said. "It seems that future actions still need to consider the wind direction and shorten the operation time as much as possible." This is not to say that Lin Yang and Claire have a strong taste, although it may be like this now, but because people often move in groups and are accustomed to some of their own smells, the brain has long taken it lightly. But zombies have mutated into non-humans, so they retain the animal instinct to respond to human odors. "Uncle Ku, how did you come up with this elimination method?" Speaking of mutation, Lin Yang also felt puzzled. What exactly are these zombies? If it's a virus, then it should change while alive, right? If you must die before you can change, how can a good corpse change? There are many questions, but their hard work has earned them the qualification to ask the heavens. Well, you can take a look at your phone and this shelter guidebook, which is very useful. I'll first observe the surrounding terrain to ensure a way out in the future. Claire finished his meal and left Lin Yang alone. It seemed that he thought it was better for the boy to understand it himself than to explain it himself. Mobile phone. Can it still be used now? Lin Yang finished his food and opened his phone. His email was packed to capacity, and even text messages were still being sent. Lin Yang didn't immediately click on them. He held his phone, familiar interface, commonly used apps, and even games he had played before. Looking at these things, the more familiar they were, the more Lin Yang felt disconnected. Disaster occurred and I survived, that's all. Whether it's fate or luck, Lin Yang doesn't need these unnecessary excuses to accept reality with peace of mind, because reality is already absurd and unreasonable enough. People will die for no reason and then kill others. Why can't I live for no reason? Besides, I am even striving to survive. Lin Yang ultimately did not click on applications such as photo albums or commonly used chat apps. I'm afraid most of the networking software is unusable, right? Even so, local preservation still exists, but Lin Yang only feels that those records belong to another person in another world, and the owner of the records is just called Lin Yang. After the night of disaster, both the past Lin Yang and the past world no longer exist. So the young man suppressed his moist eyes and formatted his phone. He personally shattered his past, rather than letting the towering disaster serve him. After completing all of this, Lin Yang was no longer emotionally excited. He had originally thought of borrowing Claire's phone to see what the text messages were all about, but soon, the repeated messages were sent back to his phone. Lin Yang clicked on the text message. The content is as follows. To all humanity. My fellow countrymen, our world is under attack. All dead people will stand up again and attack all living people indiscriminately, regardless of ethnicity, race, nationality, culture, or faith. No matter where you are now, please remember not to die. The following are the current intelligence sharing and frontline broadcasting. Zombies are not mutations caused by viruses, bacteria, or any known microorganisms, so living humans will not undergo zombie attacks, fluid exchange, or respiratory exchange, leading to necroptosis. The only thing that is currently certain about the mutation itself is that death becomes the dead. From the corpses to them, the short ones only take less than 10 seconds, and the long ones may take a few minutes. What kind of thing is this? Is there really something so outrageous that exists? It's like a curse. When Lin Yang saw this, he couldn't help roast. The good news is that injury won't cause mutation, so Uncle Ku's injury is no problem. After breathing a sigh of relief, Lin Yang continued to look down. So even if you eat zombie meat, it cannot cause mutations, but we do not recommend doing so because your stomach cannot digest them. It will only cause diarrhea, and even if cooked, it will not become delicious. Zombies have no self-awareness, only after removing all rational aggression, they can still see, hear, smell, and touch everything we can also feel. You can cancel their perception ability by attacking their sensory organs, or you can cancel their mobility by breaking bones and muscles, but they themselves are extremely difficult to completely kill. According to eyewitness reports, there are 2 ways to kill them. 1. More than 50% of its parts are damaged. 2. The remaining largest part is less than 50% of the original volume. Sure enough, Lin Yang anticipated. Can bullets not kill them, or is it because the extent or degree of damage is not enough? If we give them a shell and blow half of their body away, no matter how capable they are, they will also die, right? It's better to say that since I can't move anymore, it's no different from dying. Next is the military's battle report. On the first day of the disaster, 13% of the world's land area fell, concentrated in large cities and densely populated areas, with an estimated death toll of 300 million. The military has given up on recapturing large cities in the short term. For the sake of long-term considerations, we must ensure that industrial and agricultural production bases are not destroyed. Therefore, for those who are still in cities, please do your best to survive. The following are the locations of refugee centers and shelters in various regions, and your phone will only receive the one closest to you. Refugee Center. A very precise latitude and longitude coordinate. Shelter. Lin Yang's current location. Please remember, even if we temporarily eliminate them, as long as there is still death in this world, they cannot be killed. Please remember, for the sake of humanity, to survive. The broadcast is over. Is it a refugee center? Lin Yang simply subtracts 2 longitude and latitude, which seems to be quite far from here in a straight line, not to mention the actual distance. Until there are sufficient supplies and good equipment, we can only ignore going there for now. Lin Yang looked at the sender, whose name was Survivor Broadcast. He wanted to try making a phone call, but found that his phone still had no signal, not to mention other communication software. It seems that this text message was sent from above. Even if the military is not paralyzed, public services are already visibly ruined. This tourist town cannot expect a military to rescue it in the short term. We can only rely on ourselves. Lin Yang's judgment was generally correct, and almost all survivors who received this text message thought so. All survivors who survived the first day of the Great Cataclysm chose the right thing. To rely on themselves. But to some extent, they have overlooked or underestimated another point. The military, or human violent machines, which are not reliable in this situation. Leaving aside the fact that the army itself was caught off guard, on the other hand, simply delaying the enemy in waiting in place cannot wait for the army to come and rescue. There are two reasons. The first one is obvious. While survivors are still struggling to survive on the front line, the army is retreating to ensure a so-called human rear. However, in this cursed world, there is no so-called rear, so these self-proclaimed survivor broadcasters are just running away. On the other hand, the military is also composed of people. Before specific operations, weapons and ammunition, maintenance and repair, energy and fuel, food and supplies, and so on are all operated and produced by people. Now, these links have been impacted. The military, or the political leaders representing the military, seem to be retreating in order to preserve the living power of humanity for their own continuation. In fact, Zhaosuiyuan.com is expanding the control scope and strength of these links while reducing internal casualties. Of course, not all armies in this world have chosen to surrender without fighting so badly, and Lin Yang remembered his homeland. But he was too far away from home and couldn't count on the soldiers from his hometown. Lin Yang vaguely felt that even if there were still troops taking on the responsibility of guarding, they would find it difficult to take care of everyone. Therefore, there will definitely be a large number of civilian survivor organizations, who are the main part of the vast land, such as myself and Claire. The second reason is that the enemy has not even truly appeared. No one knows why people turn into zombies after death. Facing this situation, the army is exhausted, and even 18 types of martial arts are not effective. To reclaim the human world, it is necessary to understand the source of the curse. Therefore, before this, the only thing the military could do was to defend some strongholds. Even if they cleared the entire large city of zombies, they were just recapturing an empty shell. Lin Yang didn't think much about it for the time being. He just felt that the military was not an expert in handling such matters. If zombies were spread by viruses, the military could still cooperate with epidemic prevention. But what should we do when facing something that can even be called a curse? Who should I go to and what knowledge should I learn to fight against it? Perhaps it could only be a scientist, or a magician. Lin Yang carefully guessed. It seemed that he had a plan for what major to fill in during his college transfer. After some thought, he decided to first choose the name abnormal biology. This subject may seem quite unpopular now, but Lin Yang is determined to use all his wisdom and strength to live in this cursed world and fight to the end. Chapter 5. Guidance Manual. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. After Lin Yang established his own major, he began to use his phone to record his existing knowledge about the Great Cataclysm. He was not in a hurry to find Claire, nor was he really tired to the point of not wanting to move. On the contrary, the more he recorded what he saw and heard on the first night, the more excited he felt for the rest of his life, making him strive to recall the painful memories that had caused him so much pain. The experience of causing Lin Yang to have nightmares the night before has now turned into valuable survival and struggle experience. For example, Lin Yang learned about the perceptual ability of zombies. At night, they have the farthest sense of smell, followed by hearing and vision, but their accuracy increases in sequence. However, during the day, the order will be reversed, perhaps not far from normal humans. At this point, Lin Yang immediately wanted to verify his various inferences about zombies. He couldn't wait to see with his own eyes whether the undead spirits he detested were as obedient as he imagined in his mind. Lin Yang may not have realized that transformation has quietly occurred, both for himself and for the world. The curse of the dead may, in turn, become a blessing for the living. The Great Cataclysm is like this, whether you want it or not, it is completely changing the entire world. Yes, for those who are still trying their best to survive, the Great Cataclysm is also an opportunity they exchanged with blood and tears. The old world no longer exists, and Lin Yang embarked on a path completely different from what his parents or society had planned for him, which did not exist the night before. After taking notes from the previous night, Lin Yang thought about how to name them. Calling them abnormality biology notes seemed good, but he wanted a more grand name, which could be considered a name for the world that took away his parents and everything in the past. So the word Cataclysm first appeared in the records of human history. After Lin Yang finished writing, Claire also returned to the shelter. The first thing he did when he stepped into the door was to open the curtains next to the back door. "Woo, Uncle Ku, what are you doing? Aren't you afraid of being seen by zombies?" Lin Yang was stabbed so hard that he couldn't open his eyes, but he wasn't panicked. He knew in his heart that Claire wouldn't let them fall into danger for no reason. He must have checked his surroundings beforehand. "It's okay, the area is currently very safe. The surrounding forests are much higher than this shelter, and you have to climb up trees to see the town." Claire's observation was also as expected by Lin Yang. Originally, there was a forest outside, and the back door turned away from the town, so zombies naturally wouldn't appear here in a short period of time. Claire, on the other hand, appeared to be quite rough and capable of climbing trees, which surprised Lin Yang a bit. At the same time, he was also very curious. What exactly is Uncle Ku from? In short, when zombies come knocking on their doors, it's also like starting a war at the front door, and Claire proposed to first set up some defensive fortifications in front of the shelter. The shelter is too close to the town. Last night, they drove back in less than 10 minutes, and no matter how slow they walked, it was only half an hour. How could they wander the street on the side of their bed? In order to sleep peacefully in the future, warning is necessary. To benefit one's work, one must first sharpen one's tools. The two immediately searched for useful tools, which was the backpack that Lin Yang desperately snatched back last night. Compared to the bag full of delicious food, he still prioritized the heavy package containing various tools. Now, they have all kinds of tools, ranging from needle and thread bags, hammers, wrenches, screwdrivers, and can openers, to saws, drills, angle grinders, and crowbars. The two of them are even a bit surprised to be able to stuff so many things into just 2 backpacks. The tools that require electricity can be charged with the car they drove back last night. The two of them also found a shovel in the trunk of the car. There is more than enough space for decorating the house. If they want to establish a position, they need to find ways to use these tools to obtain materials. Gradually, the two will become more proficient in using them. For Claire, he has helped renovate his own bar and definitely has much more experience than Lin Yang, but Lin Yang learns faster and his skills will soon become even more exquisite, which is highly anticipated. 2 people were assigned tasks, Lin Yang simply reinforced the shelter, and Claire made some defenses along the road. Claire cleared a backpack, loaded some tools and food, and then left. Lin Yang carefully observed the structure of the shelter. He first needed to seal the windows with wooden boards, and relying solely on curtains to block the zombies was somewhat self-deceptive. The wooden boards came from their original beds, and there were many benches in the shelter. Now it seems that these extra beds are no longer needed, and it seems that only the 2 of them survived in the entire town. Looking at his own bed, Lin Yang didn't think about whether there were any living people in the small town now. If there were, it was a decision they could only make after meeting. Even if the world had already collapsed, Lin Yang did not intend to hastily decide the fate of people he had never met before. He used crisis as a shield to gain the power to manipulate others recklessly. The young man looked down upon it, otherwise what was the difference between him and this despicable world? Lin Yang was steadily advancing the construction of defensive fortifications. He first used a screwdriver or hammer to remove the nails from the bench, put them away, and then carefully removed the long wooden boards, being careful not to break them with adhesive. Then used the same nails to seal the windows side by side, just like moving a bench to the wall. A few times back and forth, the sunlight stretched out Lin Yang's figure. He had never felt that time would fly so fast, but he felt extremely fulfilled, as if he was truly living as himself now. After completion, even if the curtains were pulled open, the thick wooden boards surrounded the shelter without any leakage, enhancing a lot of security. After being sealed off, Lin Yang went to the basement of the shelter to see what medical supplies were available. He found that they were mostly topical drugs for treating wounds, as well as disinfectants. The basement and shelter are generally large, with 2 additional toilet compartments in the structure and a toilet inside. However, in the current situation, the toilet can only be used once. If the water tank is opened, the water inside may boil and be drinkable. Obviously, the basement looks much safer, and even if zombies find nearby, it's difficult to find anyone hiding there. Moreover, the terrain of the stairs is also conducive to a resistance battle, but on the other hand, it is necessary to dig another path, otherwise being surrounded here will be doomed sooner or later. If you want to dig a tunnel that runs away or do something else, the biggest problem in the basement is the lack of light. Candles and phones can't last long, and lighting a fire is also a bad choice. Lin Yang remembered the atomic lamp he had used during the night battle. It was feared that the planet would be destroyed, but it could continue to shine in the universe. He didn't know if this small town existed. He silently took out his phone and recorded what he needed to look for specifically next time he went to the town. Returning to the ground, Lin Yang picked up the shelter guide that Claire had placed on his bench. The black thin book had nothing on its cover except for its name, and the back felt a bump. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a large XE. He was a bit surprised that yesterday it was black, but he found it himself. At the same time, a question arises. Why is there such a place near the town? It doesn't feel like the civil defense facilities used during the war. The structure here is too simple, without even an emergency contact phone, and the area is too small. The manual generously paid for the boy's curiosity, almost making him feel overwhelmed. If someone opens this manual in an emergency to solve a crisis, then the world of humanity has come to an end. What is this? As soon as Lin Yang opened the cover, he was intimidated by the few large characters on the first page. All the curiosity he had gained turned into doubt, driving him to continue flipping inside. The shelters you have found with a guidebook will not appear in the public view of any region until the event XE.666 occurs and any measures are taken by relevant departments according to the plan. They are legally constructed under the names of individual donations, social charity funds, national infrastructure projects, etc., with only one purpose. Take in any possible survivors and, according to this manual, find us, or the heritage and truth buried in our bodies. Next came a long string of mixed statements of numbers and letters that Lin Yang couldn't understand at all. It could only be some kind of password, which Lin Yang had no choice but to continue reading. Remember, do not trust any organization that claims to protect and represent survivors in the future, whether it is official or civilian. They are powerless. Even if someone takes out the password book for these manuals, don't trust it. Any slogan or reason for investigating biological weapons, virus research, or distributing antidotes cannot be used as a source of legitimacy for their actions. You don't understand the truth. The method of cracking passwords is completely uniform within a certain area, but each shelter will only have one copy of this manual, and their passwords themselves may not be the same. What is this? The pyramid schemes and cult organizations that write and cheat money are the same. If it weren't for Lin Yang sitting on the bench in the shelter now, he would never have believed these nonsense. But at the same time, a vague answer came to his mind. Did anyone know about this disaster in advance? With a guess in mind, Lin Yang finished reading the following content in one breath. The density of shelters is not determined by population, they only come from specific research projects in the region and are scattered around the world. So, if your area has a high density of shelters, more than 3, you must immediately start running away. Stay away from here, at least find a shelter for refuge, stay away from all existing human settlements. After the XE.666 incident, in principle, all maps and other materials will be published in a new version, and the accurate location of shelters in the area will be marked. Attached here is a map of a 10-kilometer radius around the town, which is very different from the tourist map that Lin Yang previously held. The difference is that the shelter is marked with a prominent black star. Fortunately, there is no second black star on this map. Unless you already have the ability and determination to find us, it will be a disaster for you. You must be prepared for everything you can think of in order to be qualified to delve into the world. The answer lies within it. Find us. Signature. Xe der. Lin Yang tried to spell the pronunciation, which should be an abbreviation for a certain organization. Let's ask Claire how to pronounce it later. Some people were ahead of themselves before the Great Cataclysm, and Lin Yang thought that if they really knew that the Great Cataclysm would happen, it was very likely that it was also closely related to the Great Cataclysm itself. Lin Yang put down the booklet and began to ponder, with more and more doubts in his heart. Did they anticipate a major disaster? If that's the case, why not give a warning in advance? Or do they just know that something big will happen, but don't know exactly what it is? What exactly are they? A giant military research and development complex enterprise. Are they the main culprits causing the catastrophe? Taking risks for huge profits and studying dangerous things, causing millions of people to be in dire straits. Or are they just a civilian warning organization? Also known as a godly stick, builds shelters by fabricating crises, embezzles funds, or whatever, but the wolf has really come. There is nothing to infer from this thin book of riddles, but Lin Yang judged that the former situation is much more likely, but the actual situation may be slightly different. Once, while still in school, Lin Yang heard from his parents that there was a very expensive body-building medicine on the market, and of course, he thought it was just a health product boasting about its efficacy. It wasn't until his roommate boasted to him in the dormitory that he had taken this medicine that he represented the college in winning the 100-meter sprint championship at the sports meet. Originally, his roommate couldn't run away from him. He vaguely remembered the pill waved in his roommate's hand, with the words Xe printed on the black and white capsules. Isn't this inexplicable medicine the truth that dead people can mutate? Lin Yang thought without hesitation. That's too ridiculous. Lin Yang immediately denied it. Obviously, not everyone has taken this medicine, but when a person dies, they will definitely become zombies. This is not something that can be explained by any medicine or virus. Zombies, after all, do not conform to energy conservation. People have all died, their hearts have stopped beating, blood no longer flows, and the digestive system has long been shut down. So, where does the energy for cell respiration and muscle contraction come from? Whether it's medicine or viruses, they must be effective only when a person is alive. Even if it's in a state of pseudo-death, the brain stops working, at least the body is still circulating. So, later zombie films were mostly set as viruses not killing the host, but controlling the host. By supplementing the setting and catering to the increasingly picky taste of the public, Lin Yang is one of the audience who often nitpicks. However, the zombies in front of me now are completely dead. Claire has said that they will still crawl out of the cemetery and are undoubtedly undead. Ghosts or curses? Lin Yang came to the conclusion he had drawn from reading text messages on his phone before, but he remained non-committal because it was not much different from saying that it was a certain super virus that caused people to mutate. It had little room for explanation and was more like a placebo that convinced living people. After a moment of reflection, Lin Yang realized that it was not just about chasing shadows before the Great Cataclysm, but now there are also many opportunities to prove whether what the Black Book said is true. For example, the previous Survivor broadcast also mentioned that zombies are not caused by viral infections. For example, before a recent point in time, these shelters should not have been found in the publicly accessible information, which is also before the so-called Xe.666 incident occurred, and Xe.666 is likely to refer to the cause of the Great Cataclysm. In this way, Lin Yang has a true time frame for the occurrence of the Great Cataclysm, at least, which is the self-proclaimed XE. The results of DRA's organizational recognition. Now we can only jot down these questions as puzzles one by one on our phone. At least, that string of passwords still made Lin Yang look forward to it. He also typed them word by word into his phone, just in case. Compared to dying inexplicably, Lin Yang naturally wanted to uncover the truth. The battle of wits and courage against the Great Cataclysm also supported the young man step by step for countless days and nights to come. Chapter 6. Uncle Ku's Past. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Shortly after Lin Yang finished flipping through the guidebook, Claire also returned to the shelter. I knocked down a few trees and piled up some soil on the road not far away. Let's just make a simple fence door. I originally wanted to make some wooden spikes, but the tools at hand are really not useful. Let's go together next time, it will be more efficient. No problem, Uncle Ku, I'm tired of staying here too. Lin Yang put down his phone and responded to Claire. Let's eat, I've picked a lot of wild fruits that can be eaten. Claire put down her backpack and pulled out a plastic bag containing some kind of fruit. Is this a cranberry? Lin Yang looked at the bright red and plump fruit, and the clam immediately began to stir and dance on its tongue. You actually recognize this kind of fruit, don't you have it at home? Yes, that's why I've always wanted to eat here. Lin Yang was overjoyed. The Lin Yang family was originally here for tourism, and it would be pitiful if they hadn't even tried local specialties. This thing tastes better when made into jam. Wait for me for a while. Claire pulled out some kitchen utensils and squatted next to the two remaining benches in the shelter, starting to cook. During the waiting period, Lin Yang sat on the bench swinging his feet, full of anticipation. In order not to be too anxious, the young man kept asking his uncle. Uncle Ku, how could you know so much? Do all the bar owners here understand so much? Uncle took out a big pot from under his bench, poured all the cranberries into it, and then took out a small bottle of white sugar from his coat that he didn't know when to stuff. He sprinkled it in moderation, then added a little more than half a bottle of water and stirred evenly. After living for a long time, I naturally learn more. When I was young, I wandered around the mountains and waters, and had visited all the mountains and waters around me, big and small. It was only when I became a bar owner that I learned how to mix wine. After the ingredients were ready, Claire found a small pot in the corner, filled it with dry firewood, and placed it under the courtyard next to the entrance of the basement. It was then surrounded by stones and used as a brazier. Can you learn so much by playing in the mountains and water? I think you still know how to use a spear, right? The young man gestured with his uncle's spear posture last night, stabbing him empty-handed. Chum. It seems that an invisible zombie fell to the ground in response. I have also studied under a teacher before, and for this reason, I have even caused trouble to run away from home. When you have time, if you want to learn, I can teach you. Starting a fire, the dry firewood crackled, not as wild as last night. It was gentle and controllable, only spreading warmth and peace of mind. The young man didn't say much, he buried his expectations in his heart one by one, but the uncle continued to release surprises, like a magician who could perform skillfully without exquisite props. In no time, the flesh of the fruit bloomed, the soup bubbled with sauce, and the sour and sweet fruity aroma filled the small shelter, embellishing this alcohol-free bar. Wait for 10 minutes and the can will be sealed. If you're hungry, you can eat something first, said the uncle, feeling a bit hot. He took off his coat and rolled up his shirt sleeves. The young man saw the uncle's exposed arm and unconsciously exclaimed. Uncle Ku. What's wrong with your hands? The uncle's right hand and entire arm were as blue and white as iron, devoid of blood, with a hint of unusual luster floating in their pallor. They were both metal and plastic, not human flesh and blood. Oh, I've forgotten to tell you, the uncle said as he rolled up his pants and took off his shoes. His right leg, from the sole of his foot to the base of his thigh, was also as white as steel, looking as hard as a rock, but moving seemed lighter than a feather. There is a cost to wandering around. Once, my friend and I stumbled while climbing a mountain and broke half of our body. My parents couldn't bear it and spent a lot of money to repair my right leg. So, prosthetics. This texture doesn't look like ordinary materials, is it the legendary CBM? Biochemical plugin. This is an organic metal, which seems quite big, but it's not a biochemical plugin. Only military or wealthy people have that kind of thing, right? Mine is not that powerful, it's just a bionic prosthetic. It does indeed enhance a lot of strength, and most people don't have a chance to fight with me. Upon hearing the uncle's words, the young man also remembered that he had only heard his roommate boasting that he had a CBM at home. In fact, none of them, including the uncle, had actually seen CBM with their own eyes, but this did not prevent the young man's longing from overflowing. This is too handsome. If I could get it too, we wouldn't be afraid of getting hurt. Tisk, it's not that easy. Even if we get it, we won't have surgery. And this thing needs regular maintenance, otherwise it will cause shoulder inflammation. Ah. What kind of maintenance do we need? Our current conditions may not be very convenient, right? Don't worry, it's still a long time, there will be a chance. As they chatted, a curtain made of stars hung down from the sky, and the two of them fulfilled their wish by eating with jam. Waiting was worth it, as the taste improved and sealing allowed the jam to last longer. The two of them didn't say much during the meal, just staring at the cheerful flame. It's estimated that even if it's soaked in soy sauce, the protein rations will still be dry and difficult to swallow. However, the sour, sweet, and fragrant flavors have greatly improved the taste and nutrition of the dinner. Claire looked at the young man's still slightly immature face and casually thought that even in this great disaster, the future of the young man was still full of expectations. Maybe one day, he can really get bionic prosthetics or CBM, and by then, just zombies will be at ease. At this moment, Lin Yang interrupted Claire's thoughts and asked. Uncle Ko, why did you come back to save me last night? Claire was slightly surprised, but the boy didn't seem to have any obvious emotional fluctuations and calmly asked this question. Looking at the boy's serious profile, Claire's gaze jumped back and forth between the flames and jam. He also asked himself at this moment. Why would he go to help a young man from a foreign land who he had never met? Yeah, isn't it that I'm using Lin Yang as a bait for emergency situations, or a flashlight that doesn't light up at night? If it's not like this, what else could it be? Claire recalled last night, the eve of the disaster, and the more distant past. When he was young, he boasted about traveling around the world, but could that really be considered an adventure? Every time, don't you still need his wealthy parents to provide him with a cushion? Even the prestigious bar was an inheritance that Claire felt he needed to repay his parents for their hard work in seeking medical treatment for him. Until the great cataclysm, Claire's life was smooth sailing. She pursued her hobbies in her youth and had a stable home and decent job in middle age, all thanks to the favorable environment created by her parents. After his parents died, Claire's life naturally left him alone. He originally just wanted to sell his property, continue his youth of wandering mountains and rivers, and continue to be an unknown ranger in a broader world. But all of that was because he knew that there was a normal life waiting for him to return, and when bored, he could just leave and adjust his life. Every time he comes back from his travels, he can boast about his experiences with others, instead of always being a wild man in the wilderness. Now, that normal life no longer exists, at least not unconditionally. Now, only my own life is still struggling in this crazy world. If it's just for himself, will he still respond to the young man who asked for help? If it's just for oneself, what did the young man give himself? Claire was also searching for an answer, not in a hurry. It wasn't until he needed to add fuel that he finally spoke up. Speaking of which, you may not believe it. Last night when I was in the garage, I just bent down to look for the car keyhole. When I looked up and couldn't find where you were, I immediately panicked. And in the house, you wanted to retrieve your backpack, but it was surrounded by zombies in advance, right? Actually, if it's dangerous, I won't say anything if you come back directly. Did you give me the key because you didn't know how to drive? Aren't you afraid I'll just run away? Claire asked back, knowing that this was actually the same thing Lin Yang was asking, so before the boy could answer, he gave his own answer. Perhaps it sounds cliché, but you have shown me the courage to live in the darkness. Lin Yang remained silent, and Claire continued to say. I do think your night vision is very convenient, but it doesn't mean you can't do it without it. How do I know you're not lying to me, or using night vision to get rid of me in the dark? A simple truth is, if you haven't done anything, how do I know you can trust me? But last night, you were the one leading the way, and I could only follow behind you, timid and hesitant to take another step. If I find something, I will immediately come to you to see it clearly. That's the fact. The boy still lowered his head, silently dipping himself in jam for dinner, not because the food was dry and difficult to speak. However, he really didn't think that much. If Claire trusts Lin Yang because he saw him risking his life and paving the way for himself, it is indeed a good reason. Lin Yang never thought about why he would unconditionally trust Claire, even though Claire gave him the cliché answer. If a teenager has thought about something, it's just one sentence. I'm still alive. That's all, and living people should have the right to choose, because that is their life itself. So, it was also at this moment that Lin Yang felt the hidden sourness in the long-lost sweet breath spreading at the corner of his mouth. If the youth chose a path full of challenges and courage, then what path did Claire take? Did I show Claire courage? But when my eyes were wide open, only blood stains darker than the night and curses that could never die were scattered throughout. Where did courage come from in such a world? Is Uncle saying, am I a person full of courage? What was it that supported me to escape here last night? Animal instincts that fear death. Unable to escape the tragic death of loved ones. Or to push oneself away from the disgust of pain and blood. Why did you decide to return to that hell? Is it because of the company of a stranger whom I trust for some unknown reason? Or do you just want to vent your anger and avenge your parents? Can those be called courage? The young man remained puzzled as he looked up at Claire, his eyes filled with a thirst for answers. Claire then revealed an answer that the boy himself was not aware of. Yes, just facing such a world. It is already a kind of courage. Before you arrive at the shelter. I don't have anything like that. I would be in such a hurry to find a car, just wanting to escape. It's either a second or a meter, as long as I can stay away from here. It's you who made me muster the courage to face the darkness. I'm not timid, just don't want to face those things, don't want to accept, the next life is with those zombies, but also in this end of the world with nothing hard to survive, even if the death is not peaceful, who wants to live such a life? Upon hearing this, Lin Yang understood. Claire's calmness last night did not come from having fully accepted his experience. It is precisely Claire who completely refuses all of this. He thought to himself, as long as he escaped, even though he was no longer young, as long as he could leave this crazy land, everything could start over again. However, no matter how Claire convinced himself, he did not take any steps to leave the shelter. He can't do it. What if he grabs the car, where can he go? How can he, who was originally independent from the world, find the meaning of seeking survival in this world where he licks blood at the tip of his sword? How can he find a place to settle down in this chaotic and disorderly world, without the protection of his parents? Until the boy broke through the darkness and told him through his actions. In this great disaster, living itself is meaning and courage. Even if the young man had just lost his loved ones, even if he had just survived from hell. The young man fearlessly said, let's give it a try. Yes, we need to give it a try. The road ahead can only be tried, even if it means risking one's life. No, only my own life can tell them where the road is. Therefore, Claire simply recounted what he had seen from Lin Yang to him. Lin Yang finally knew the reason why he trusted Claire. Because before Lin Yang trusted Claire, Claire had already trusted Lin Yang. Claire was not wrong before. Without Lin Yang, he wouldn't have been able to leave the shelter at night because the boy not only directly pushed aside the darkness, but also psychologically dispelled Claire's confusion and fear of darkness. So, when he stepped out of the shelter, Claire had already chosen to trust Lin Yang. Lin Yang did not disappoint this trust, and of course, Claire would not abandon it. Otherwise, what is the difference between Claire and this unreasonable catastrophe? He finally found the meaning of living from Lin Yang. Is it farting? The dancers swaying in the small brazier gradually rested, and the two were also in a state of weak digestion of food in their stomachs. Because they were dipping in sauce, both of them ate more than usual and sat contentedly on the bench to rest. Lin Yang touched the black booklet beside him and pointed to it, saying, "Uncle Ku, have you seen this too?" Claire nodded briefly in response, and Lin Yang continued. "I think we can still live with a meaning, which is to ask the heavens. Questioning the gods. Yes, we must figure out exactly how the Great Cataclysm occurred." "Do you call this the Great Cataclysm?" "It's quite appropriate." Now it was Claire's turn not to think too much. Of course, Lin Yang was not in a hurry to go up and uncover the truth. As long as they continue to live, they will have a chance. This is the promise forged by the flesh and blood of every living person during the Cataclysm. % at night, I don't know if it's because I've read that black booklet and my mind is always restless. I toss and turn, and I can't sleep anymore. It's not that I'm afraid of having nightmares. I already had one last night, and now the world is no different from nightmares. The key is my restless heart, as if reminding me to think about an important issue, but also as if warning me not to think too much about it. This question has always been hidden in my mind. Since I escaped from the hotel, it has been vaguely there. In the corner of my mind, I have never, or dare not, face it directly. How did my father become a zombie? When he turned into a zombie, his mother was still alive. If he were attacked, they were likely to both die, rather than live and die. Because I didn't see many zombies in the hotel hallway, at least there were no other zombies near their rooms, and the door was not forcibly damaged. So, where did my father and the victims at the beginning of the catastrophe come from? How did the first group of people who turned into zombies die? How could there be so many dead people suddenly appearing if they crawled out of the cemetery or were about to die? Not to mention that many cities nowadays do not have cemeteries at all, and there are no corpses inside. It is impossible for such a small number of dead people in the morgue to cause a global zombie crisis. Moreover, the initial number of deaths increases in areas with larger populations. This is a very straightforward logic. Only by reaching a certain proportion and density can a chain reaction of death be triggered. Converted to this small town, it would take hundreds of zombies to trigger an avalanche-like riot at the beginning. So the question is, how did these hundreds of people die? Does it happen that so many people in the small town died in one night due to accidents or natural aging? How could that be? Let's not mention that my father doesn't have any life-threatening sudden illnesses. If an accident of this magnitude occurred, 10 people would have died, which would be big news. Not to mention in big cities, there will only be more deaths at the beginning, but how many people in the world suddenly die overnight? Yes, the most terrifying thing is not that the Great Cataclysm caused the dead to turn into zombies, so many more people died afterwards, but rather that so many people suddenly died at the beginning of the Great Cataclysm. Only in this way can we explain the overwhelming number of zombies, not just the death toll mentioned in the broadcast. I have always made a mistake, thinking that the zombies of the Cataclysm can quickly infect living people just like in movies, but in fact, because zombies are not caused by virus mutations. In other words, their infectivity is not strong, so zombies in small groups do not have much killing power, and even hundreds or even thousands of zombies may not threaten organized police and military. Although they are difficult to kill, if you get bitten, you won't mutate at all. It's not like passing it on from one person to another, as everyone knows today. So at the beginning, what exactly happened at that beginning? Why do so many people die for no reason? Why happened to be that night? If someone dies for no reason, would it be my turn? Why did I survive? Why did my father die for no reason? Can't I suddenly become a zombie one day? Even though I slept soundly the night before, there were no other fatal factors, but when the time came, I passed away. It's not even a complete death. It's like when the reaper gets upset one day, the sickle on his head swings down and lightly carries away his life. After death, he also turns into his running dog and zombie to bring trouble to the world. The more I think about it, the more fear of death is dug out in my mind. It seems that this is why I have always been unwilling to think about this issue. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is due to the instinct of animals to escape death. Because maybe thinking about it, I'll die, hee what a joke, how could there be such a ridiculous thing? I will never accept it, I will never accept it. Is it that my parents died suddenly, inexplicably, like this? What did they do wrong? What did we do wrong again? Why? What's the point? I must figure out what happened, why people died, why there were zombies, and what exactly happened on the night of the disaster. We must find the truth. Chapter 7. Using more to deceive less. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, night came again, and it was the first day that Lin Yang and Claire truly survived the great cataclysm. The next morning, the two of them took a nap before getting up again. They decided to follow suit and take advantage of Lin Yang's night vision to carry out activities on the edge of the town in the dark. The first thing to confirm is the situation between us and the enemy. Their equipment is not much different from last night, except for 2 extra backpacks and some tools. Therefore, the number of zombies that can be dealt with and the supplies that can be brought back are very limited, and due to the huge difference in the number of enemies and friends, they must not be surrounded. But on the other hand, the smallest 2-person team has excellent flexibility and maneuverability. At night, the visual ability of the zombies is greatly weakened, and their perception ability is very blurry. They need to take advantage of the advantages and disadvantages of the enemy and ourselves to create favorable conditions for 2 against 1. That is to say, tick them one by one. Very primitive but also very effective tactics. Ancient humans have already used the sound of fire or drums to disperse herds of beasts and make them fall alone. The specific operation depends on the current distribution of zombies. The 2 of them didn't turn on their car lights and covered them with paper. They slowly drove and reached a nearby intersection, where they had seen zombies next to the trash can they were hiding from last night. Tonight, there was no wind. The 2 of them turned the car around and got off without disturbing the slow zombie. They hid next to several trees on the side of the road. Lin Yang picked up a stone and threw it at the trash can, knocking over one of the trash cans. The zombie did indeed turn back and walk. At the same time, they also confirmed that there were no other zombies around because the noise made by Lin Yang could be heard in their location. If there were zombies closer to the trash can, they would definitely hear them and appear. Don't worry in the forest either. Although the footsteps of ordinary zombies are not slow, they are very clumsy. They will definitely make sounds in the forest to make the 2 of them notice in advance. In order to combat zombies, they also need to utilize all their senses. Next, Claire arranged a simple trap with branches and vines. Lin Yang made another noise and led the zombie to his side. When it fell, Claire, who was hiding beside it, picked up a large stone and threw it on its head. In no time, the zombie stopped moving and then stepped on both hands and feet, completely solving one. Claire also noticed that zombies do not howl when attacked. It seems that she really exerted too much force last night. This method may not be considered efficient, but it is safe and has no other drawbacks besides being time-consuming. The two of them used the same method to trap and kill all the dozen or so zombies around the intersection, ensuring smooth access to the town. The night was very cold, but the two of them still sweated hot like last night. In addition to their original clothes, the paper armor wrapped around them could also keep them warm. Although they didn't have to worry about the temperature, it was really uncomfortable to wear. As a result, the two of them expended some energy in useless places. Of course, compared to the desperate run on the first night, this is nothing, especially since their mentality is now much more stable and they can continue to delve deeper into the town. But in open areas, without the cover of forests, simple traps cannot be used to deal with enemies. The density of zombies has also increased, sometimes attracting multiple zombies at the same time, which is obviously not what the two people expected, but it is also not impossible to handle. The method is to hook them together, then use a stone to remotely hit one of the heads, causing it to distance itself from the other, and then use a spear to break the leg of the previous one. When the latter one catches up, they will treat it the same way. Facing the two fallen zombies on the ground is not a big problem. Not long after, the two of them fought back to the street entrance where they searched for supplies last night. Now, all the loot is in the 10th house they searched for, which is the place where they found the car, about 300 meters away, about 2 or 3 intersections away. The fire did not burn down here, and the shock wave of the gas station explosion unexpectedly dispersed the flames on the edge of the town. This is both an opportunity and a problem. Because there are still a considerable number of zombies there, and they gather very densely. Lin Yang even saw that the zombies they killed in the car accident yesterday are still crawling on the ground, ready to move. It's not easy to handle, Lin Yang whispered while explaining the situation on the street to Claire. As I thought, we can only temporarily retreat or search elsewhere. Claire calmly gave a choice and continued, if we retreat to the outer ring road at the intersection, we can enter the town from other locations along the north and south directions. Lin Yang said wait, he needs to further see this place. Good. Claire nodded in tacit agreement, thinking that increasing the distance would increase the number of zombies. If we were to clean up slowly like this, it would take several nights to ensure the smoothness of other roads. If you choose to bypass the zombies on the path, if something unexpected happens while searching in the small town, they will be surrounded in all directions. Now there is no other noise in the small town, and the zombies will only swarm towards the two people who have exposed their whereabouts, making it really difficult for them to escape. The two ultimately decided to clear the zombie swarm in front of them. On the one hand, from the shelter to the town, which is the closest, this is an important strategic node whether it is to search for supplies in the future or to ensure the safety of the shelter. On the other hand, the two also came up with a breath. It is not sustainable to always see zombies and hide, thinking about running away. Taking advantage of their sufficient resources and energy, actively attacking can potentially open up the situation, and being complacent is just a trap. Because although the small town was burned down halfway, the remaining materials in the buildings were completely enough for the two to survive, provided they cleared the obstacles. The small town is not big, with only about 10,000 permanent residents, most of whom have already been buried in the flames. Even so, only 1/10 of the bodies are still active, which is enough to submerge the two people. And now, in front of the two people is 1/10 of the 10th. Due to the disturbance caused by their previous car theft, all the zombies in the southwest corner of the town are now concentrated here. That is to say, to lead them out one by one, it will inevitably take a lot of time to wait for them to disperse on their own. In order to strike this place before the food runs out, a different path must be taken, and the two need to seek ways to strike more with less. While Lin Yang continued to observe the situation, Claire pondered how to eliminate this group of zombies. To win more with less, it is necessary to maximize one's own advantages while taking advantage of the enemy's shortcomings. The maximum energy that the two of them can manipulate is that car, but using it to collide with zombies is actually the last resort. If the speed is not fast, it is difficult to effectively hit the enemy. If the speed is too fast, the car will suffer equal damage and become difficult to control. It is okay to hit 10 or so zombies, but hundreds of zombies coming from all directions may not be effective. What if we first look for weapons? Claire thought that she was pulling out her gun and shooting to restrain her nervousness, while Lin Yang had never touched the gun and wouldn't use it even if she got it. Therefore, on the first night of the search, the two deliberately did not go to get their guns, but they had a clear idea of where the guns of several nearby houses were placed in front of them. However, handguns are also unable to effectively kill zombies. The caliber is too small, and one or two can still kick. Don't think about groups, otherwise the police won't be defeated. Compared to the risk of shooting, the benefits brought are negligible. As long as the gun is fired, there may be more than a few hundred zombies attracted by the sound of gunfire. Just as Claire was at a loss, Lin Yang looked at the wreckage of the street not far away, lost in thought, and whispered. "Uncle Ko, there's a way to get rid of them all at once." "What?" "Setting fire." The two of them briefly remained silent, and the power of flames gradually came to mind. The use of fire has been one of the determining factors for humans to distinguish animals since ancient times. Find a house, attract the zombies, and then burn them all together. A simple and easy to understand plan, but how does it execute? The two of them immediately started selecting a location, first ensuring that the fire was controllable, that is, a single house, otherwise burning down the remaining small town would not be worth the loss. Fortunately, Lin Yang recalled that at the intersection, not far north of the town, there was a mansion that was far away from other buildings on the street. It was from there that he fled into the forest near the shelter on his first night. The two of them immediately set off, clearing out the few zombies on the road, and arrived at the mansion to start preparing for the next action. The mansion is currently in good condition, so there is a high probability that it will have an alarm. The two did not immediately break through forcefully because its alarm has now become part of the plan. Based on Claire's experience in decorating bars, the alarm can be connected to the internet and the sound is not loud, probably similar to the beep of a car. This will be a double-edged sword. The two of them certainly didn't want the alarm sound to be loud enough to attract zombies throughout the city, but the mansion was 5 or 6 streets away from the target zombie group, and the sound clearly couldn't reach there, only attracting a few scattered zombies around. Only by relying on themselves to bring the zombie swarm closer can they have the opportunity to take advantage of this mansion. This is undoubtedly a gamble, failure equals death. If there is nothing else to distract the zombies, once they are targeted, they will be chased to death, unless they are fast enough to use the terrain to escape their sight. Even so, their endurance cannot compete with the deceased. We had to drive them over, the two of them thought, but they didn't immediately return to the road in the forest. Instead, they further inspected the mansion to ensure the smooth implementation of the plan. The first step is to confirm the exit route. Secondly, it is necessary to ensure that the mansion catches fire smoothly. The heavy gate of the mansion courtyard is open, surrounded and enclosed by towering iron railings. A gap needs to be opened on the other side to ensure an escape exit. Entering the courtyard of a luxury mansion, the space is spacious and even allows for driving around. The backyard is also very large, and it is like a small forest with an underground garage next to it. But now, none of these things are needed. No matter what is in the house or courtyard, the two will not trigger an alarm in advance. What they lack is food from the town, not gold and silver jewelry from the rich. Beyond the fence in the backyard, there is a forest near the outskirts of the town, which is where Lin Yang and Claire come from. The two of them used crowbars and saws to cut off a corner of the railing here. It turned away from the town, and zombies would only attack from the front, making it a reasonable escape point and convenient for them to find fuel. But this mansion is really big. Just the house itself, there are 400 or 500 square meters on the first floor, right? There are still 3 or 4 floors, so it feels like it can be a hotel. After walking around the mansion and determining the escape route, Lin Yang sighed, but Claire said. In terms of luxury homes, this is actually considered small, right? Just don't think about what's inside, it will definitely allow those zombies to visit enough. After familiarizing themselves with the terrain outside the mansion, the two of them began preparing to set up traps. Unlike other buildings in the small town, the appearance of luxury houses looks like they are all made of stone, which makes Lin Yang a little worried about its effect as a trap. Claire said there's no need to worry, he has been here before, and besides that, the floor of the mansion is made of wood. Which famous person's house is this? Have you even visited it before? It's the mayor's, he probably went out to play before. Judging from his current posture, he definitely can't come back. We can just burn it casually. The small grove in the backyard can provide a lot of dry firewood. If it's not enough, go look for it in the woods outside. It would be even better if there's gasoline, which can burn easily. Fortunately, Claire found flammable resin in short, Zhaosuiyuan.com has sufficient fuel, and they have surrounded the mansion with a layer of firewood, with a focus on adding more around the windows. In the end, only a window leading to the backyard was left to escape from the mansion, and the two naturally hoped to complete the task without entering the mansion. However, in this world, it is not wrong to keep a backhand. After completing the task, the two of them left their paper armor and resin as a starting point for the fire. They also used resin to make 2 torches and planned to light the house ahead of time. After all, burning firewood also takes time. A few rounds back and forth, even in winter, the time at night is exhausted, and the sky is hazy. Zombies are more easily attracted during the day, which is just right for both parties. In the end, they determined the action plan for this fire attack. Claire drove to attract zombies, while Lin Yang stayed in the mansion preparing to set fire and sound the alarm. After reaching the intersection, the car can use its speed to shake off the chasing zombies and park at the escape point behind the mansion. Then, the two of them demolished the front door of the mansion and triggered an alarm. Then the two of them lit fires around the house clockwise and counterclockwise, ensuring that the house could ignite. At the same time, they ran to the parking spot behind them and drove away. The plan seems relatively complete, but to ensure that the alarm can sound, we can only try to pull the alarm first. Otherwise, if we light it first, it will take more time to escape and be safer. When the zombie team arrives, they will only be attracted by the sound of alarms and the residual scent of the two of them, rushing into the mansion, moth to flame, and seeking their own way to death. Lin Yang and Claire also urinated under the main entrance steps, which not only relieved their internal anxiety but also further attracted the zombies who came here. This is a classic fire attack, everything is ready, except for the east wind. Coincidentally, the target zombie group is right to their east. Chapter 8. Death Ring. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, are you ready? Claire held a pry bar and inserted it into the door handle, pressing one knee against the door in a ready-to-exert force position. Lin Yangzheng stood with him in front of the main entrance of a mansion. Prior to this, Claire had already driven the zombie swarm to a nearby intersection not far from here. Lin Yang held a torch in both hands, nodded silently, and repeatedly simulated in his heart that the door lock was broken. The alarm sound alarmed the zombies, attracting them to the moment of this flame trap filled with dry firewood. Bang! The door lock broke in response, indicating that Claire had put in a lot of effort. But the alarm did not sound. What's going on? Claire hesitated and opened the door, but the alarm still didn't sound. The gate is very imposing, not that it is really as heavy as a castle, but that modern double-door anti-theft doors come with many flashy decorations, but only without an alarm installed. After opening the door, the absent guests disappointed the expectations of the two. If there was no alarm in this room and it could not attract zombies, it would be equivalent to them working all night in vain. Can it be that the alarm is out of power? Lin Yang tried to guess, seeking a way to make up for the plan. Claire, on the other hand, reasonably denied his speculation. No, the alarm comes with a battery, so it can be used even when there is a power outage. Well, at least we can go inside now and see what's inside. Maybe there's more than one alarm in this house. Lin Yang tried to think in a positive direction, but Claire could only agree. The two extinguished the torch, left it at the door, and then entered the mansion together. The morning is not enough to illuminate a mansion, and for people with average vision, they should only be able to see a slight outline of the interior. But only those strangely shaped black shadows seem to showcase the ultimate luxury of furniture and decoration. The lobby on the first floor leads directly to the second floor, with crystal-clear chandeliers hanging on the top. It refracts the faint light outside the window and hits the huge woolen carpet, full of mystery and tranquility, making it unbearable to put on shoes and step. Uncle Ku, when did you come here? While searching in the hall, Lin Yang tried to ease the dull atmosphere. On the bright side, at least they didn't need to fight zombies today, but could freely collect and scrape luxury homes, right? I came here when I was a child and lived here when I ran away from home. So, is Claire here to apprentice and learn? It seems that this town mayor has a considerable background, and it is also possible that wealthy people are like this. They have spare time to specialize in some things, but they happen to be useful in the apocalypse. There was nothing easy to find in the hall, and the two continued to delve deeper into the mansion. There should be a kitchen and restaurant on the first floor, and they soon found them, which could be considered as adding some food. Unfortunately, there wasn't much food available. The biggest harvest was a bag of flour and some vegetables, while the rest were mostly colorful seasonings. If only given to the two of them, they could eat it for a lifetime. It seems that wealthy people prefer fresh food over hoarding, and in their eyes, the whole town may be a place for hoarding. The lobby, dining room, kitchen, and reception room on the first floor are all outrageous in size, but there aren't many useful things. The pots, bowls, ladles, and pans are not lacking, but there are other tools for servants in the storage room. Lin Yang found many ropes, some long, some short, some thick, and some thin. Claire found a pruning clipper, which was a large pair of scissors, but in Claire's hand, it was as lightweight as a regular pair of scissors. On the first floor, even though we had finished exploring, when we returned to the lobby and climbed the stairs to the second floor, Claire seemed to remember something and muttered to herself behind Lin Yang. "What's wrong, Uncle Ku?" "I remember, that old man couldn't even bear to install an alarm at the main entrance, but there must be one there." Lin Yang looked puzzled, while Claire said you would know as soon as you reached the second floor. Indeed, because the second floor is like an exhibition hall of a large shopping mall, apart from the dazzling array of gemstones, there are also various antique items such as paintings, porcelain, swords, and even firearms that look very valuable. However, that can also be considered some kind of antique. After all, these guns look very dated and practical. When I was a child, I was playing hide and seek here and even bumped into these cabinets. The alarm at that time startled me a lot. However, the alarm for these small treasures was also very quiet, and I knew where the big guy was. Claire touched a glass cover containing a picture scroll while speaking, but now is not the time to reminisce. He continued. "There is a gem, and the old man must have filled it with an alarm." The two of them arrived at the gem that Claire had mentioned, and with just one glance, they could tell the owner's love for it. The gem stands out among the chickens, occupying the central position of the second floor alone, and even has a skylight piercing through the third floor, opening it up alone. But rather than being a gem, it was more like a black pearl. Its perfect figure seemed to reflect non-existent black light, and for some reason, its flawless surface made Lin Yang shudder. Coupled with this semi-black room, it felt even more eerie. As long as this cover is broken, there will definitely be enough loud noise to attract zombies, Claire said confidently, indicating that their plans can resume. They immediately began to implement the original plan, first putting the spoils of war on the car, and this time there was no chance to fold them back and take them. The third floor is the bedroom and residence of the homeowner, and there aren't many useful things. Lin Yang found an asthma inhaler and various pills, that's all. They decided not to waste time and energy searching anymore. Secondly, the two of them also put their coats in the car, making it colder to avoid causing any inconvenience. Preparation was completed beforehand, and Lin Yang lit a torch at the main entrance, waiting for Claire to sound the alarm on the second floor of the mansion, and then set fire together as planned to escape. Woo 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 woo, the alarm is ringing. But it's too loud. What's that old man thinking? Claire shouted and rushed down from the second floor, making the wooden floor creak. He came to the room and pulled Lin Yang to escape. Lin Yang was somewhat unmoved. What are you waiting for? In a little while, all the zombies in the city will come over. Claire didn't look back and pulled Lin Yang down the stairs, but was finally stopped by Lin Yang. There's still a chance, Uncle Ku. Just wait for them to come. What? Claire finally turned around and saw Lin Yang's face. He seemed to calm down a bit and said. Even if we ignite it now, we won't be able to burn them all. Yes. As long as the fire is ignited, the alarm will soon disappear. Even zombies will not be foolish enough to continue charging into the fire, otherwise the big fire that burned half of the town would have burned them up long ago. At this point, igniting the fire can only burn a small amount of zombies that were previously led to the intersection, which is completely useless. There is also a possibility of missing the time to run or exposing the escape route, and being chased by other zombies in the town to a shelter. What if two people wait for the zombies to arrive before igniting the fire? Then we can't expect zombies to foolishly charge towards the mansion, and the possibility of chasing the two is even greater. Either take advantage of the present and ignite the fire before the zombies even look at you, and burn as many as you can, or run for your life immediately. There is no reason to wait. However, Uncle Ku, listen to me, this is how it can be done. I am sitting on a stone in the backyard. This is the corner behind the mansion, and Claire is located in the opposite corner. Woo 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 woo, this alarm is too exaggerated. Those who don't know think the town has been bombed. Can the mayor of the district act recklessly like that? I think about some out-of-tune things and try to make myself less nervous. Perhaps the word tension is not enough to describe our current situation. Just like the first night, we are still deeply immersed in the threat of death, anxious, fearful, repressed. All the negative emotions brought about by death are deeply ingrained in our hearts. But this time, we jumped involuntarily. Here we go. Bang, yika, the sharp sound of the iron fence being impacted stimulated my eardrum. The sun has risen, and the light it sheds allows us to see each other clearly. I only saw those instinctively repulsive faces for the first time at this moment. The most shocking thing in people's hearts is the hollow eye sockets, which are vigorously opened, almost occupying the entire eyeball, but only the endless desire for the flesh and blood of living people is left, and any action reflected is extremely violent. Now, we are facing each other directly through a thin iron fence. Sure enough, after seeing me directly, their target changed from the occasional alarm sound to myself. Get up, take a few steps, and the group of corpses on the other side of the fence also changed their center of gravity, always facing me and oppressing me. This should just be a few hundred zombies near the intersection. I know in my heart that the main force is still behind, and I can't be scared by this small advance force. Even if there is a battle between two factions, we cannot be afraid. Once the matter is at this point, we must not fail. I'm afraid Uncle Ku is the same, right? I looked back and he was also restless, nervously looking outside the railing, occasionally turning his head to look at me. Clapping, gripping, hammering, tearing. They use every means possible, with hundreds of hands crossing the fence, filling the gaps as high as mine. Fortunately, this zombie density alone cannot break through the iron fence of a mansion. The quality of the iron poles is excellent, and the foundation of the railing is made of cement piers, which also has sufficient height. So we can still wait until the remaining half of the town's zombies all gathered here, the number alone could crush the fence. That's when we light the fire. Squeak, squeak. 3 minutes have passed, and the zombies are still constantly pouncing, but before the time comes, there will be more than just a few zombies. Whether it's the railing or Claire and I, they can still continue to support each other. Boom boom boom. After a while, it was perhaps the longest 10 minutes of my life, until a dark cloud appeared on the road at the end of my sight. The dark clouds shamelessly licked the ground and pressed towards us, which was the great flood made of corpses during the Cataclysm. It's time. Claire and I turned around to look at each other, raised torches, and set fire to the mansion from both ends. Dry pine resin and waste paper can ignite at a moment, igniting a pile of dry firewood, but we cannot stop, keep running. Go to the next ignition point. Continue to ignite. Until flames fill everything in front of us. Dong! The tremendous impact sound came from behind my side, even overshadowing the unknown alarm sound. I looked sideways and saw that the iron railing behind me was bent to an end. The zombies with their hands stuck on it were trampled and crushed without any concern, and groups of zombies climbed over the railing, ready to tear us into pieces. Whoa! Cough! I continued to sprint with all my might, throwing the torch towards the last ignition point at the end of the firewood pile, while also choking on the smoke blown by the wind. But that's not the wind. Countless zombies are surging like a tide behind me, squeezing our only living space. Even the air is thin, and the smoke is squeezed and dispersed in all directions. There is only one place to escape now, and that is inside the mansion that was just ignited by us. After setting off the fire, Claire and I almost met at the main entrance at the same time. He was sweating profusely and I was soaked through. Bang! In front of the mansion, the gate of the courtyard not far from us was suddenly knocked open. The heavy gate that we had worked hard to pull up was now so fragile that we were surrounded on 3 sides. Let's go! Claire shouted, and we strode over the steps, stepped into the main entrance of the mansion, and continued to run wildly in it, escaping in the opposite direction from the newly lit circle of death. Sparks splattered all over the mansion. Glass, wooden floors, and various expensive furniture are playing together in the high temperature, bursting and collapsing one after another. Looking out from the window, one can even see zombies constantly beating the house through the fire wall. It is feared that behind the mansion that started the fire, there is already a burning inferno. But we're just going that way. Because there is only one exit, which is the window we left leading to the backyard. Only there is sunlight shining in instead of fire, and only there is the shortest route through the mansion. Even if it's just a short step, otherwise we don't know which one will devour us first, the undead or the flames. Hoo-hoo. Standing straight in the smoke-filled building, gasping for breath, would only make us die faster. Claire and I ran not far and could only lie on the ground, struggling to crawl forward. At this moment, we had just advanced half the distance of the mansion. Damn it, why is the house so big? Claire kept cursing, and I couldn't express my pain. Unlike him, my stamina was about to bottom out and I was gradually left behind. Claire grabbed my collar and continued to grip the ground with the other hand, pulling us both forward together. Don't give up, the plan you proposed, we also need to climb it together. I was inspired and kept climbing forward, striving to follow Claire. However, after climbing for a while, one of my feet seemed to be caught by something. My heart contracted like a sudden stop, and I didn't want to recall this strange feeling. The chill from my ankles even gave me the illusion of being burned. I may have wished I had been burned to the ground, but looking back, a blazing zombie pounced on the ground, its dirty and dilapidated hands on my ankle. And behind us, dozens of blazing zombies are crazily attacking us. They don't need to breathe, as long as they see the target clearly, they will quickly come and catch up with us. I immediately turned to my side, pulled the zombie closer with a jerk of my foot, and kicked my other leg in the face, finally breaking free from the zombie. But I kicked too lightly and didn't get far away from the zombie. However, a few bright red paw marks were cut on my calf and abdomen. In this hot hell, even the blood that blocked the wound was constantly evaporated, causing me unbearable pain. As I watched the zombie hugging my feet again, I had to try my best to get up. However, as I stood up and was about to take a strong step, my legs seemed to dissolve in acid, and a sudden surge of powerlessness dragged me to the ground. Oh! Long hours of intense exercise have already pushed the muscles to their limits, let alone in this sea of fire where there is no oxygen at all. Am I already exhausted? I'm afraid the only oxygen in the body is in the brain, right? Not long after, I will experience hypoxia and then become unconscious, which is also good. At least I won't feel any pain when I die, but how could I die here? Ah! I shouted out, dispelling the hallucinations my brain had created in an attempt to block pain. At the same time, I crawled up and drained my last bit of strength, starting the final sprint. But after only a few steps, I lost my balance and was about to fall to the ground again. At this moment, the black smoke in front of me reached out a big hand and grabbed me as I was falling. He threw it forcefully, and I flew away from the sea of fire. When I looked around again, my body was pressed against a carefully cut shrub, and my breathing was much smoother. Claire immediately flipped through the window behind me and jumped out. Do we still have strength? We need to keep running. I stumbled up and continued to follow Claire. But we slowed down to some extent. Firstly, our physical strength had reached its limit, and secondly, the zombies were all attracted to the front of the mansion as we wished, and burned out there. Only in this way can we successfully escape from the back of the mansion along the original route while attracting zombies throughout the city. I have lost the memory of running through the backyard woods to the car, just like the last lap of a long run. My body knows better than me that it's time to give oxygen to the muscles, not the brain. Chapter 9. Victory Wine, Part 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, oh, I'm hungry. Lin Yang slowly opened his eyes, and the light in front of him was dampened by the curtains. He returned to a safe shelter. It is estimated to be noon again, and the reversed life of the sun and moon did not make Lin Yang too tired. On the contrary, a shorter sleep time can make Lin Yang energetic again. The soreness in Lin Yang's body still accompanied him, but he gradually got used to it. Just like on the first day of learning to ride a bike, his waist and buttocks would feel sore soon after riding, but similarly, his body would adjust and adapt on its own before long, and people would learn to ride a bike. Lin Yang opened the food cabinet and was surprised to find that one head of the small pile of food had been cut off in just 2 days. We've almost eaten that terrible thing, Lin Yang couldn't help but sigh, as if his body was collecting debts and demanding corresponding rewards. So he dipped himself in jam and ate another pack of protein rations. He wasn't worried about running out of food, because it was time to test the results of these 2 nights. The amount of food is not an obstacle, to exaggerate, even if there is only 1 refrigerator left in the town, the food inside is enough for 2 people to live for another day or 2. Not to mention that they found food from 10 refrigerators on their first night, but now those backpacks are all left in one house. As long as they can retrieve them, they don't have to worry about food this week. So there is only one obstacle, the undead who cannot die. Have they burned them all together with their corpses? The food was too dry and it was not realistic to quickly swallow it in big gulps. Lin Yang took out his phone and began to pass the time. The first thing is naturally to update intelligence about the Great Cataclysm, including Lin Yang's own abnormal biology, and text messages sent by organizations claiming to be survivor broadcasting. Lin Yang clicked on it, and the beginning was the same as what he received yesterday. Lin Yang directly assigned it to intelligence sharing and war reports. By analyzing combat records and conducting experiments on captured zombies, the current intelligence on zombies is as follows. Zombies are quieter at night than during the day because they usually receive weaker sensory stimulation at night. For example, when zombies can only hear small sounds, they tend to move slowly towards the source of the sound, and if they see it directly, they will quickly approach the target by running under strong sensory stimulation. Zombies can become violent, including strong sounds, direct visual contact with living people, strong smells, and so on. Is it sensory stimulation? Lin Yang looked at these words and began to think, which was also an experience he planned to record in his abnormal notes. After all, they had just set fire to half of the town's zombies with a loud alarm sound in the early morning. However, the same question remains. Why? The sense of where the dead come from is itself a problem, let alone whether they can become violent or not based on the degree of sensory stimulation. How can a decaying brain receive sensory information? I'm afraid even if you get hit by a handgun, they can still see you and pounce on you, but if they shoot out their eyes, they won't be able to see. This matter is really mysterious. Lin Yang thought to himself, how can one be considered dead in this world? If death is difficult to define, then what is considered living? The human soul and consciousness are gone, but the senses are still manipulating the body. Isn't that saying that the senses are truly living things? It's a bit like those primitive animals, without a nervous system and relying solely on simple reflexes to respond. Perhaps zombies are not dead, but rather have a weakened nervous system. No, there's another fatal question. Where does the energy come from? Are their hearts still beating, and you can't tell they're still breathing? Due to too many questions, Lin Yang had to hang them in his heart and continue reading. The study of living zombies has also confirmed the speculation that zombies are not mutated from viruses, and they have indeed died medically. Respiratory arrest, cardiac arrest, brain death. More results require further research, which is difficult as we are still relocating and protecting civilians. Please be patient and support us. Next is the military battle report. On the second day of the disaster, 16% of the world's land area fell, spreading from major cities to surrounding areas, and reports of large groups of deaths also emerged in other areas with moderate populations. The estimated death toll is 400 million. We have successfully established contact with the main armies in the east, and based on the situation, we have unanimously divided the world into two major war zones. East and West. The Eastern Theater Command has contained the spread of disasters from major cities to other areas and effectively organized a death screening list. We strongly recommend that the world follow this measure. All corpses must be cremated, and those who have recently been buried must be promptly controlled, and more people must be mobilized to investigate and fill in any gaps. The following message from the Eastern Theater Command. For the inevitable elongation of the front line in time and space, we must mobilize all available forces. Blindly running away will only lead us to fall into an ever-increasing encirclement. Overall, the situation in the southern part of the Eastern Theater Command is not optimistic, as it is not only densely populated and difficult to control, but we still have not established contact with it. The overall impact on the Western Theater Command is relatively small, and the evacuation of densely populated areas and the organization of rescue operations are proceeding in an orderly manner. Please maintain confidence. The southern part of the Western Theater Command also needs help. Although the area is vast and sparsely populated, the medical level and military technology are not enough to resist the swarms of corpses. We will consider sending rescue troops there in the short term. Above, the text message ends with the same conclusion as the previous one, including the location of the nearest shelter and refugee center, and the phrase, "Don't die." After reading it, Lin Yang's heart was filled with mixed emotions. On the one hand, there are still many people around the world working hard to fight against disasters, which is certainly inspiring. On the other hand, Lin Yang felt like he was cut off from the world or forgotten. Perhaps most survivors also felt the same way. In the past few days, not to mention the army, living people have only seen Claire. Perhaps, the number of people affected by the disaster is far beyond the estimated hundreds of millions by broadcasting. Due to poor communication, it is difficult to grasp the situation, and broadcasting can only rely on the population and area of large cities to estimate the damage. A small town that has been basically wiped out may not have been counted by broadcasting at all. Perhaps the situation in my hometown. The Eastern Theater Command will be better, but now that Lin Yang is not there, it's useless to think so much. In short, the conclusion remains the same as on the first day. In the short term, they can only rely on the two of them to survive on their own. Fortunately, this morning's battle should have been successful, and it is time to achieve the results. After finishing lunch, Lin Yang briefly updated the information on the Great Cataclysm and his notes on abnormal biology. When he arrived outside the shelter, he did not see Claire in the car. Strange, where has Uncle Ku gone? Claire is sleeping in the car. Since she is not there, it means Claire has already woken up. Unable to find anyone, Lin Yang didn't know what to do for a while. He had intended to search around, maybe Uncle Ku was reinforcing the nearby defense works. But before taking a few steps, the soreness jumped out and dragged Lin Yang's body. "Oh, it's really useless," Lin Yang complained, leaning back on the car and rolling up his pants to look at his own legs. The bandage he had wrapped was already stained with blood and black, and Lin Yang's mind reflected the terrifying scratch under the bandage, finally compromising with himself. A good rest is also an important part of surviving in the apocalypse. Lin Yang then gave up seeking Claire and returned to the shelter to continue dealing with his injuries. If the dirty bandage was not replaced in time, the wound infection could be more deadly than the zombie itself. Fortunately, the shelter does not lack medicine. There are so many bandages that they can be worn as clothes, and there are also many disinfectants and antibacterial agents. It is definitely enough for 2 people. Lin Yang looked at himself as he changed the bandage. His clothes were all tattered and tattered. He had been blown to pieces by the forest the night before, but this morning he ran wildly in the burning mansion, making it even more dilapidated and dirty. The soles of Lin Yang's shoes were also melted by the scorching high temperature, and they were already a bit worn when walking. You can't use drinking water to wash clothes. It's time to learn how to mend clothes. Having sewing tools, it would be nice to search for a few ready-made clothes in the remaining small town after a while. However, as the saying goes, having more skills doesn't put too much pressure on oneself. Lin Yang then found a sewing bag and started self-learning how to thread needles and threads with the fabric. The day was very short, and besides, Lin Yang had already slept for a whole morning. In no time, the light left on its own, taking away the colors of the shelter. Lin Yang's night vision could not help him see the small pinholes clearly, and a beginner's technique obviously could not achieve blind stitching. However, he still managed to sew on the larger holes in his clothes and patched up the legs of his pants. At least now he can run without any air leaks. There's really no other choice but to find ready-made shoes. This is quite tiring. Lin Yang wiped his forehead and felt some soreness in his fingers and wrists. He only knew a little about things he had never done before when he got started, which made him more humble. At the moment of emotion, Claire also happened to return to the shelter. "How are you resting, Xiaolin? Is there no problem with the wound?" Claire asked as he put down his bags, each one looking packed to the brim. "No problem. It won't get infected after proper disinfection." "Where have you been, Uncle Ku?" Lin Yang couldn't help but be curious. Claire lit a fire on the side and responded with a smug expression. "There weren't many zombies left around, so I stopped by and brought back all the things we threw away the night before yesterday," Claire said as she opened her various backpacks, which were the precious items they had been forced to give up on the first night. In addition to food and water, there are also many medical and toiletries, such as stomach medicine, painkillers, antibiotics, sleeping pills, toothbrushes, cups, face masks, bath towels. In short, not only are basic needs okay now, as long as we find a water source, our daily life can also be fully satisfied. Lin Yang's curiosity was not easily satisfied, and he continued to ask, "By the way, where did you go before?" I went to the mayor's house, and there's a saying that goes, prisoners always go back to the crime scene to admire their masterpieces, right? After you recover from your injury, you must go and see it, it's so spectacular. Claire was slightly excited, and the rippling light in the brazier seemed to dance with his joy. I guess it's true that not everyone can have near-death escape experiences. The two of them were unarmed and could still bounce around in the face of a crowd of over 1,000 corpses. They must have boasted about it, and the biggest difference from the first night was that they took the initiative to face the challenge, rather than being forced to jump around. Against the backdrop of Claire, Lin Yang appeared more calm, and compared to excitement, he felt much more at ease. The zombies in the small town were completely burned, and the two of them were not in any major trouble. Their survival supplies were also replenished, and the situation was finally not as dire, and it could even be said that everything was in good condition. By the way, I also found some good things there. Wait for me to bring them in. Oh my, that's it. Claire held it. No, he held a very long thing and placed it on the bench, wrapped in rags, shaped like a cross. Is this a sword? Lin Yang said the answer, and Claire opened the rag to reveal her true identity. Huh, you should have seen this kind of guy for the first time, right? These are two-handed giant swords. That old man used this thing to beat me so badly back then. Although it is called a giant sword, it is not a heavy iron block as big as a door panel in comic games. In fact, it is a very long sword that does not feel out of balance, but is full of a sense of balance and beauty. It lay on the bench, like a poised swordsman, and the wear and tear on the hilt and holster was a calluses on his hands. The bell-shaped counterweight ball is both solemn and practical, with a long sword handle that is bold and generous. The cross-shaped sword frame is accompanied by two symmetrical ellipses, and the threads on it are finely crafted. The sword is straight, with a pair of small curved spikes attached near the frame. The tip of the sword is extremely sharp, even if there are some scratches, it still reflects a pure white-silver light. At a glance, it was clear that this was not the decoration they saw on the second floor of the mansion, but rather a weapon of killing that had been used in the battlefield for a long time. Claire pulled it up and held the hilt with both hands, with the blade facing down, standing in front of him. The sword was just as high as his chest, which was the same height as Lin Yang. Don't be intimidated by the length, this thing is not heavy. It's very easy to control after mastering it. Claire kicked the sword head lightly, creating a beautiful arc. He grabbed the handle with both hands and lifted it accordingly. The giant sword turned its head and stood upright on his body. The slender blade crossed his shoulder and pointed diagonally to the sky, allowing him to advance, retreat, and defend with ease. Wow, can I use such a long sword too? Lin Yang couldn't help but marvel, not expecting one day to see a real swordsman dancing his sword in front of him. Don't worry, the weapon design from zhaoshuyuan.com is to ensure that most people can use it. Except for the move I just performed, which may require some height, other practical skills are completely fine. Claire put the giant sword back on the bench. I can teach you how to play it tomorrow. How about it? Do you want to learn it? It's necessary, how can we not learn? It's not just about being handsome, is it? Isn't dealing with zombies like chopping melons and vegetables? Of course, using two-handed weapons to fight unarmed weapons is quite effective. Don't be fooled by its thinness, there's no problem cutting off those wooden spears. Even if you split the bones against zombies, it will require some skill, cut the muscles, and poke the eyeballs or ears, making it very easy. Damn it, Uncle Ku, don't talk anymore. I won't be able to sleep in a while. Lin Yang was so happy that he couldn't believe they could effortlessly find a big weapon. Unfortunately, there is only one handle. Speaking of which, where did Claire discover this guy? Just as Lin Yang was about to speak, Claire took out a few bottles of expensive foreign wine from his backpack at his feet. The uncle approached and said, "Come and hold it, won't it be your first time drinking at a bar? Don't be polite, without you, I won't be able to retrieve these things." Claire handed over a beautiful glass of wine, with a larger belly and shorter legs that can be held with one hand. It was precious and fragile like crystal, and it didn't look like it had been burned. So, these were all found in that mayor's mansion. It should have been burned down there. Lin Yang recalled the sea of fire and felt a chill in his heart. Even this giant sword could not have survived. Yes, the house was burned to ashes, but the old man hid some things in other places. I also found it wrong when I hit the alarm. Hey, come and sit down. Let's talk while drinking. Chapter 10. Victory Wine, Part 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, your plan is very successful. It seems that there are not many zombies left in the town. I shouted a few times on the street, but not many dared to come to me, Claire said as she picked out a good wine in her backpack, preferably suitable for Lin Yang to drink. Really, I never thought the effect would be so good. Lin Yang was not humble. When the huge alarm sounded, he just felt that he couldn't give up on it. If the two of them ran away, the consequences could be unimaginable. If Lin Yang and Claire give up their plan to attack the zombie swarm and run away, it would mean that more than 1,000 zombies would be trapped near the small town not far from the shelter, and the two would lose their important strategic position. The mansion is relatively close to the intersection of entering the small town. If the zombie swarm is active there, it will be difficult for them to break out of the encirclement even if they drive, let alone enter the small town. Whether they can escape the danger is a question. The two of them may have to give up the shelter and the car they finally found, and run away from the forest. In the scarce and bottomless forest, there are zombies constantly tracking their scent behind them, and whether they can survive or not has to be questioned. The moment the alarm rings is the moment that determines life and death. If the two of them run away recklessly, they may still be able to survive for a while, but it is very likely that it is just a game difference, leading to a vicious cycle of disadvantages and ultimately being doomed. Fortunately, they made the right choice and persevered until victory was achieved. Claire was interested in a bottle of wine with a deep color tone, but when he poured it into a glass, the wine became clear and transparent, and the color became lighter, as if its color had partially differentiated into a sweet aroma in the air. Claire is really right. Lin Yang is indeed drinking for the first time and there is no way to get high-end brandy. For first-time drinkers, although their taste buds are very sensitive, aged brandy is not spicy and has a smooth taste with an endless aftertaste, making it a great entry-level wine for newcomers. But the overly mellow and pleasant taste made Lin Yang dare to only take small sips. He seemed to be worried about getting drunk, but the intoxication had already filled the shelter with firewood, refreshing the heart. Alas, unfortunately there are no ice cubes or other ingredients to make a cocktail. If you can't drink it, just let it go. Claire didn't lose interest, but felt that her current bar was too rudimentary to match good wine and customers. Lin Yang couldn't really drink it, he was just a bit uncomfortable, so he changed the topic and said, "Uncle Ko, how do you know that the mayor is hiding something? I think those exhibits on the second floor are all priceless." Indeed, compared to those things, what we have in our hands can only be considered cheap, right? But that's why the old man hides it, hiccup, because that's what he really likes. He's hidden underground in the small garden of the mansion. Claire drank and caressed the cross guard of the giant sword, indicating that they were old acquaintances. Why? Shouldn't I just show off what I like? While sipping his wine, Lin Yang shook his glass, and the crystal-clear golden liquid seeped through. It was unclear whether it was Lin Yang's flushed face or the warm flames overflowing from the shelter. "You're still young and don't understand the tricks here. The preferences of truly wealthy and powerful people won't be made public." Claire took another sip. He was originally a bar owner and should have a good tolerance for alcohol, but after drinking a few glasses tonight, his tone became a bit drunk. Lin Yang was naturally puzzled. In his impression, wealthy people spend money recklessly just to show off their power to satisfy any hobby at will. Well, let me put it this way. Of course, there are several types of wealthy people, but there are only a few who are wealthy and powerful. Like the mayor of this small town, we all have to deal with shop owners, and it could also be with his secretary. Anyway, we can't get around him. Because only he has the ability to connect those who manage land rent, prices, imports and exports, advertising, and so on, your store will prosper and last forever. Relying solely on customers' word of mouth will not make it a century-old store. Dealing with these guys, on the surface, relies on interpersonal relationships. As we all know, in the end, it's just a matter of exchanging benefits. The simplest and most direct way is to give gifts. This is just the first step, but it's also very important. So at this point, you don't want others to know what you really like, but rather strive to elevate your position. If you let others know that you can pass the time with cheap alcohol, it would be too cheap. The most important thing is that this is also to protect one's hobbies. For wealthy people, public hobbies cannot be considered hobbies. Even if they are public, they are just small circle pleasures. So in the end, what they further enjoyed was just the feeling of playing with others in their hands, such as saying, that guy always brings so many treasures, but in fact, I only need a little alcohol. I don't know what else I can use telling you these things. Let's just listen to a story that doesn't exist. Claire added a few more glasses, which looked like he had drunk a lot, but only consumed half a bottle. Lin Yang was quite enthusiastic about listening. With Claire's help, he finally finished a shallow glass, as if he had experienced what it felt like to drink. Is this two-handed giant sword the same? Is it his hobby? Yes, and it's not just a hobby. He can also create one himself. When I was a child, I didn't understand where he got it. After all, there were no blacksmiths in the town, and the collectibles he bought were just pretentious things, making people think he didn't know how to do it. It wasn't until I returned there today and searched around that I discovered a hidden wine cellar under the garden. No, not only that, but it was also a blacksmith's shop. Let's go somewhere next time. Lin Yang half opened his mouth, squinted his eyes, half awake and half drunk, and said happily, "It's really good to live a little longer. You can understand so much." He seemed to strengthen his desire to live even more from the intoxication of alcohol. No, I've been going back and forth with these people since I was a child. After all, my parents are also like that. If they understand people thoroughly, they will naturally understand. Look, that old man wouldn't even want to throw away the wine I brewed. Lin Yang couldn't hear what Claire had said at the end, and the two of them drank and slept for half a night. Finally, they ate some food that was at least appetizing and fell asleep again. In this post-apocalyptic world, a peaceful sleep is more precious than 1,000 gold and silver, and there is no reason not to enjoy it. The next day, the two of them slept until noon. This time, it was Claire who had slept before. It seems that he did drink a lot. When Lin Yang felt himself hiccuping, he could still emit a concentrated sour taste of apples. The smell came out of his throat and became less unpleasant. However, since he was not short of water for the time being, rinsing his mouth was still fine. Arriving outside the shelter to wash up, Lin Yang felt his body unexpectedly light and agile. He removed the bandage from his foot and his injuries almost healed. Can this improve so quickly? Lin Yang was surprised and casually swung his legs, as if there was no major problem. The recovery speed of my body in the past 2 days is indeed a bit strange. It is not an exaggeration to say that Lin Yang's calf, due to the lack of armor protection, was gouged out a few pieces of flesh when he broke free from the zombie. The wound was deep, large, and long, and both of them thought that the injury would not last for 10.5 days. But Lin Yang only slept for 2 nights, and the terrifying scratch was left with only shallow and long scars, which looked quite wild. Not to mention yesterday, Lin Yang was running wildly every day during the Great Cataclysm, but every time he didn't sleep long, he regained his spirit. Every time I wake up at noon, my body aches and I struggle to walk, but at night I can continue to run rally races with zombies. Is human adaptability really that strong? After washing up, Lin Yang took out his phone and silently recorded his situation in the notes of Abnormal Biology. Anyway, since the dead are so abnormal, it's not surprising that the living also mutate a bit, Lin Yang concluded roughly. He let out a hiccup and temporarily let the problem go with the alcohol. After all, since the great cataclysm has occurred so far, everything we encounter is not without mystery. There are already several long pages written on our phones, and adding one more is not a big deal. Although the injury doesn't affect the movement much anymore, it's better not to run around alone when the serious illness is just recovering. Lin Yang sat on a stone outside the shelter, organizing notes on the major disaster, which can also be considered as dispersing his alcohol breath. When organizing his notes, Lin Yang also found that besides various issues and intelligence related to the great cataclysm itself, there were still quite a few things to look for, such as a place to wash clothes, a lamp that could be used for a long time, a pickaxe that could chisel open walls. It seems that we can't just focus on big and empty issues, there are still many things to do. Not long after, Claire also woke up, but he seemed to be not very energetic. Oh, the bar owner has a hangover, it's really embarrassing. He laughed at himself and went outside to sober up. He pushed open the door and found that Lin Yang was sitting next to him. Why are you sitting here? You almost kicked me. Cough, which one of your injuries is better not to move around, just rest well. Claire became anxious and almost vomited, quickly running to the foot of a tree on the side. The injury is fine now. How could it be? When I ran back the day before yesterday, I was startled. I can't joke about that wound. After leaning against the tree for a while, Claire also sat next to Lin Yang. But look, it's almost ready now, isn't it? Well, how could it be? Besides having night vision, can you still quickly gain weight? I don't know, but I shouldn't have been like this before, right? Before. Did it mean before the great cataclysm, didn't you also mutate? Claire's also refers to Lin Yang experiencing some kind of mutation like zombies. Who knows, I can't say for sure, can I? Lin Yang was also worried. After all, no matter how much he thought, a normal person who was seriously injured cannot recover so quickly. I'm not saying that I can't be killed like a zombie. I also feel that my energy has been surprisingly good lately. No matter how tired I am, I can almost run for another day after sleeping. Claire said something unexpected to Lin Yang. When Claire was young, he had also honed his physique, but in middle age, he often stayed with alcohol and lived a life of day and night reversal. It was strange that his physical strength was even better than Lin Yang's. Really? When you say it, I don't think it's a big deal. Even the dead can move now, but the living can run faster. Seeing Claire not mind his abnormality, Lin Yang was completely relieved. Yeah, you see, after just saying it for a while, I feel like I'm almost sobering up. Let's have something to eat. Indeed, Claire is much more energetic than when she first came out. If she had been drinking too much before, it wouldn't have been better for a day or two. The two of them left a shelter full of alcohol and sat outside to eat together. Surrounded by the forest, it is refreshing and cool. The wind gently sways the tall trees, and the sunlight passes through the branches to soothe the grass on the ground. It is lively but not peaceful, and peaceful yet not hollow. After a long absence, the two don't have to worry about what to eat next, nor do they have to force themselves to swallow unpleasant food. We'll go over later. Is your injury really okay? Don't worry, look, isn't running and jumping without any delay. Okay, there's a lot to look for, isn't there? Let's drive over and find a place to charge the car. By the way, Uncle Ku, I still need to learn how to drive. The two of them made simple preparations and set off again for the small town, but unlike usual, they no longer had to timidly wait until the evening. Through this battle, the two truly possessed the conditions to survive the catastrophe. Whether due to luck, courage, or some kind of foresight, their correct strategic execution has created space and time for themselves to survive. As time goes on, the different outcomes caused by different strategies will gradually be revealed. Therefore, soon everyone will agree that it is foolish to engage in a war of attrition with zombies while retreating. Fortunately, their courage overcame foolishness.